Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're back. We're here. Welcome, friends and fiends, to another Red Death Mass stream. If you're new to the stream, or if you just want to hear me talk about what it's about again for some reason, we're gonna be reading horror stories, specifically fan stories from the Tales from the Creeps or the CREEPCAST fan story subreddit. And yeah, we're going to be doing a continuation of Devil's Den today, which I'm really looking forward to. We had a great start, great part one with that. Really look forward to getting into that series. And then we're also just going to read this standalone, The Dancers at the Club All Knew My Name, from Kaiju Fan 22. And then the Devil's Den author is Howler of the Hills on Reddit. So shout out to both of those authors, and shout out to everyone. I'll continue to remind people this post, this calling all authors post, was made. It's now a locked post, but it was made a long time ago at the beginning of the Tales from the Creep subreddit. And I'm still just working my way through this list. So I have another document where I check stories off. I've had Howler of the Hills is right here, but I've read a lot more of the stories. I haven't just read this far down. But yeah, basically my goal is to eventually read every story that I can read from this post. Some have since been deleted and things like that, so it's not every single story I'm going to be able to read, but I'm still just working towards that. And as I told people, I plan on getting to every story eventually. And so today we're going to do Kaiju Fan, and I actually want to say shout out to Kaiju Fan, because way back when I first started reading stories, and I think it was I don't even know how I came in. Well, it was on the regular CreepCast subreddit, or CreepCast submissions, one of these other subreddits that popped up earlier before Tales from the Creeps was even made. They were posting stories on there, and they were one of the first people whose stories I ever read. I think it was when I was still streaming on Twitch. It wasn't on YouTube, but it was on Twitch at this time. And so, yeah, it was really, it was just cool to see their name pop up again, and to see that they're still writing and they're still active in all the new subreddits and stuff. Cause yeah, if you are in the subreddits enough, if you're reading comments and stuff on Tales from the Creeps, you will see Kaiju Fan's name, and it's a memorable name. I think is one of the main reasons I remember it. But yeah, and so just shout out to them, because it is kind of cool, because it's been a while since I've read any of their stuff, but they were also one of the first people I ever interacted with, read their story. I think maybe they even watched the stream and thanked me or whatever. So just shout out to Kaiju Fan for being such a active not just writer, but also reader and just member of these subreddits. They are, yeah, they're awesome from everything I know about them. And not that I know much, I'm just saying that it's so cool to see people stick around, and people I don't know if popularity is the right word, but you come to recognize certain names, and you hear things, whether it's a screen name or a specific story, you hear it talked about, in different circles on a Discord server or whatever else. And it's just cool. So I'm happy to be reading one of their stories today. And then also, while we're doing the shout out thing, I have another couple quick things to mention. The Mesoscale podcast. So this is a new mesothelioma disease, another very memorable Reddit name for a Reddit user, and they have been reading stories on the subreddit for a while, and they've actually created their own sort of like scale for how they rate stories, and for when they're giving people feedback on stories. And what's really cool is they've taken that sort of uh I don't know, format, and they've made it into a podcast. And I think it's him and his wife, or him and his wife both run the account of mesothelioma disease, so it's both of them. And I think maybe they're both writers, from what I understand. And they just started this podcast, which I mean, this is the subreddit for it. This is like the intro. There's a subreddit where you can post stories called the mesothelioma podcast, but it is on like Spotify, I think, and I haven't found it on YouTube quite yet. I don't know if maybe I need to look better. But yeah, so very cool. So here is this. Oh, this is Apple Podcast. So Apple Podcasts, which I don't use, but Spotify, all that good stuff, and their first episode is out, so shout out to them. I haven't I started listening to it, but I haven't listened to it all yet. But it's just really cool to see more people highlighting stories, and giving feedback to writers, and yeah, doing that. That's awesome. And so I wish them the best. And yeah, go check out the Mesoscale podcast. I think it's a great name. I think the mesothelioma is obviously a funny name. And like the mesoscale, I like it. It sounds, it makes you think about like Richter scale or something else, but it's purely a scale for judging online horror stories. But they it's just got a good ring to it. I really think, like, just as a name, the Mesoscale podcast has legs. I mean, I immediately was like, I want to check that out, So shout out to them. And yeah, go check it out, at least on Spotify, for sure. I mean, Apple Podcasts too. I wish I knew if it was on YouTube definitively or not, because then I would just subscribe and do it on YouTube. But anyways, not important. So yeah, that is the plan for today. We got two stories. One's a multi part, so I just kept it to the two, because odds are we're probably gonna get into a few parts of Devil's Den. So I didn't want to overpack the stream today, but that is the plan. Oh, and then I knew I was forgetting something else. And then, last but certainly not least, maybe the most important shout out, and one I will continue to do, is everybody go subscribe to the North American Pantheon. Obviously, it's a story that's been around for a while. It's called Fuck HIPAA, or the North American Pantheon is what people call it, like on No Sleep and stuff. And it's just been really awesome so far. It's a full audio like series, like show, with like voice acting and good production and stuff, and it's been just really cool. Like, there's so far, I think, maybe 5 episodes, and I've enjoyed every one. I'm finding it interesting. I think that my main issue with it right now, and I say issue, it's not really an issue, is just that I wish it was all out. I wish I could binge it, because I really want to get into like the backstory of like the main character. I forget her name, but Rachel, I don't know, the main agent who's interviewing these inmates that are part of the North American Pantheon, that are in the prison that houses gods and monsters. So cool. If you are a person who, like me, likes monsters and gods and all that stuff, but you always want to know more about them, you always want to know more of like the lore, or just their origin stories, that is what takes front and center in this series, and that's what I love about it. It's such a different take on like creature or monster horror. Like, yes, it's got some vibes of like SCP and other stuff in that there's a foundation, there's a organization that runs this prison and all that stuff. But it's so interesting because the monsters and the creatures are really like the main characters in the story. Like, sure, there's the narrator, there's the person who's interviewing them, who's like our main protagonist or main character, but um it really is this. It's not so much her story, at least not yet, that we're hearing about. It's the story of these monsters and how they came to be inmates there and all that stuff. And it's so cool. And they're not just monsters, they're entities, they're multi-dimensional, whatever. That was the Harlequin was just their most recent episode, and that's what that one was about, was like, how do you deal with an entity that basically can't be contained and can't be kind of does what it wants when it wants, you know what I mean? And it's really interesting, yeah, hearing the beginning of that and hearing kind of like the reason that monster or that entity maybe sticks around but then also still does what it wants, is like because it wants an audience and all that stuff. Was kind of my take on it, is that it is a performer kind of creature. So although it disappears people and takes people out of reality and into its own, it's called the City Bright, is like its own dimension. Which again, really creepy, great name. It's yeah, it's awesome. It's because it does that. It's like, yes, it does that, but it also wants whoever it's around it to like, it wants to play jokes on people. It wants to be kind of a trickster entity, even though it is also like very dangerous and evil. And I find that like dichotomy really interesting, that it's like, oh, it laughs all the time, or it wants to play jokes and pranks on people and make people laugh, but then it also wants to just disappear people and change reality in ways, in whatever way tickles its fancy. It's very like, it seems very petty and whimsical in that kind of way. And so yeah, I've really enjoyed it. And what's nice is like each episode is a new kind of monster, or at least thus far, but we know that at certain points we know we're going to get like a part 2, or we know that like that's not the end of that monster story. And so as the series really gets cooking and into season 2 and stuff, I just have a feeling, cuz I've never read any of it. I'm experiencing it all for the first time on this audio series. I just have a feeling that it's going to get really awesome, and you're going to get these late stage kind of stories of these entities interacting inside and outside of the prison, and some tracking the other ones down. And so therefore there are going to be these beefs between kind of entities, and almost like prison prison entity gangs forming. It sounds kind of silly when I put it that way, but it's done in such a way that like I think it cuts through like a lot of the noise, and it's not trying to be like this badass like story about like prison violence just with supernatural stuff. Like, it's not like some sort of Prison Break or Oz, but with supernatural entities. It's more like it's more just like an interview show where they're just audio tapes that we're hearing after the fact of Agent Bean, or whatever her name is. I think it's Bean, interviewing these creatures and hearing them speak kind of for the first time to anybody about why they do what they do. And it's shocking. It's really cool, but that's enough of me rambling. I want to play, because this is like the trailer for it. I do want to play this. I think I've watched it on stream before, but we're gonna play it again. Um, if it gets claimed or if whatever, then I'll deal with that after the fact. But I do want to play it because I want everyone to go subscribe to this series and just like watch it, because each episode's only like, it's like a podcast, you know, each episode's about an hour long and it's coming out once a week. And it does seem like kind of like one of these series where you could watch it from the very beginning, but it's also kind of like an X-Files in that you could jump in anywhere if like a creature sounds interesting to you, and you could kind of watch that episode just by itself. So I think it's going to be a really great not only audio series, but just series in general. I think it has a lot of potential, and I really am enjoying it thus far. So here we go. Let's watch it. And I'll let it's called Meet Our Inmates. Salua, I believe is how it's pronounced, but we'll hear it. We'll hear it once it plays. So in September 19, it was like 38, at the height of the Great Revolt in the British Mandate of Palestine, military patrol unit stumbled on a mass grave near a nomadic Bedouin camp in the Judean desert. When they exhumed the grave, they saw that every corpse was fresh and belonged to either a man or a boy. Greatly disturbed, the soldiers marched into the camp and immediately saw that the Bedouins were preparing to leave, I think it said. Sorry. I am a slow reader, and I do want to read this out loud, despite I'm sure people can just read it, you know, if they're watching my stream, but if people are just listening, you know, I want them to know the story of this, like, kind of teaser for the series, because it does kind of break down almost the whole creature, which I love for a trailer, because it's like it feels like it almost gives you a whole story just in the trailer, and then but you're like, oh, this is only a taste of what the entire series has to offer. It's so cool. Greatly disturbed, the soldiers began to march into the camp and immediately saw the Bedouins were preparing to leave. They also saw that everyone in the camp was either a little girl or a woman. And these pictures, by the way, I have to say, like, I don't know who put all the trailer together and stuff, but it is very well done. Like, I'm fully on board that, like, these are the Bedouins, these are the people, you know. Clearly there is some historical, or a lot of like historical influence in this series, in the way that it ties in like real world conflicts and dramas into supernatural like stories or entities. Very, very well done. And yeah, I love the visuals for this trailer. Even the font they used, of just the old timey typewriter font, is like it's all well thought out, very well done. And that the woman came from at least 7 separate tribes. The soldiers demanded an explanation for the grave. The woman explained they were refugees fleeing the political violence of the Great Revolt. And they were fleeing again because a demon had come in the night and slaughtered all of their men. Which, I mean, we get these kind of stories a lot, right? Where it's like some tribe or some people, whether they were like colonists, you know, with the Roanoke sort of a thing, where it's like, yeah, they were all wiped out. It's a big mystery, which, shout out to the Roanoke mystery being finally solved. I find that really interesting, that the biggest mystery of early America was that, and turns out no, the people just they had to kind of leave, and they ended up like integrating with Native Americans and um going to other colonies, and they just kind of found their way that way. You know what I mean? Like it's just so funny cuz it's like it's a story of like it is an American story of like teamwork and like assimilation, but not in the way that they wanted Native Americans to assimilate. It was like, no, we as the white in over our head colonists who are going to starve to death need to assimilate into the communities and the stuff that's already here, and we need to like learn because these people know how to survive here. We need to learn from them. It's basically the opposite of the story that was originally told, where they're like, yeah, they think the whole town was wiped out by a Native American tribe, and it's just the opposite of like the vast majority of how like colonization went, right? Like colonization is more often than not a story of white settlers or western settlers exploiting and killing and murdering uh the culture of, you know, all these indigenous peoples. And it's like the one colony that they thought got wiped out by the indigenous people, or that was like one of the theories, you know, it turns out no, they actually just, you know, lived with them like harmoniously, at least for a while, you know. um but anyways, yeah, I'm just saying, so there's sorry, I got sidetracked as fuck, but there's stories like that, right? um where somebody's a demon, somebody, you know, and it wipes out an entire tribe in the night, something like that. But I find it so interesting that like instead of just a story where it's like one man survived and this is the story, it's like no, the entity, it was a demon, but it strictly just killed all the men and boys. Like it's just a little touch like that that makes me go like, oh, this sounds like a cool story too. I'm really interested now, you know. So fun, so fun. I love it. The soldiers didn't believe them. They believed the women were lying and that they had killed their own brothers, fathers, husbands, sons, even their own infants. Sorry, and blamed an imaginary demon for this unspeakable evil. As punishment, the soldiers depicted as punishment, the soldiers decided upon execution. So they bound and blindfolded every woman and girl in the camp, lined them up, and raised their rifles. But before anyone could pull a trigger, the demon found them. 12 soldiers entered the camp that day. 2 came out. I believe that's 12. They use a I instead of a 12, but that's again old-timey typewriter shit, because a lot of times like ones, they didn't have them on the typewriter, or they didn't work anymore, so you'd have to use the capital I. Only survivor describes the killer as a demon with a face of a wolf. One survivor described the killer as a demon with the face of a wolf. The other described her as a djinn. And one's had another name for her. Salua. Yeah, I think it's Salua. Salua, noun, definition: an ancient demon from Bedouin folklore known for slaughtering men, boys, and male infants. Well, that sounds like what it is. The survivors managed to capture one photograph of Salua before she attacked. So cool. Word of the massacre quickly spread. So did word of Salua. Quickly came to the attention of the Agency of Helping Hands, which again is this agency that runs the North American Pantheon, or the North American prison for like supernatural entities. It has some other acronym name, but it's a really fun logo, and I like that their name. Part of the reason they've kept the name Agency of Helping Hands is because it allows them to pretend to be a charity and infiltrate various other like groups and organizations, and people are just like, oh, it's the Helping Hands one. Like, it just allows them to fly under the radar, and it's very funny and interesting. I believe that. It said the agency dispatched a team, a containment team, who, after many weeks and at great cost, including the lives of personnel and innocent civilians alike, finally caught Salua. Upon capture, Salua proudly admitted to decades of horrific crimes, including kidnapping, murder, infanticide, and cannibalism. Because I wanted to, and asked why she did these things. And in the interest of public safety, agency personnel tried to terminate Salua using every method available. None worked is what I think but she survived everything they did to her. With no other option, Salua was brought to NASCU. Yeah, that's the North American Special Containment Unit, where she remains incarcerated to this day. Since her capture, she hasn't stopped from trying to understand her, treat her, or rehabilitate her. But their efforts so far have been unsatisfactory.
Do you know why you're here, Salua?
When I was a child, my father kept me locked in his cellar until he grew tired of me. Then he beat me to death and threw my body to the wolves.
Why did he do that to you?
Because I was a disobedient daughter. He thought that was the worst thing a girl can be.
Do you understand why you're here now?
Because you know I'm the worst thing a woman can be.
Salua is only one of nearly 5,000 inmates currently incarcerated at NASCU. Basically, it's just explaining what this is again. Designed to hold entities like Salua, whose existence presents a grave and immediate threat to human beings. Is the largest penitentiary of its kind in the world, and the only incarceration solution for entities like Salua. Without the Agency of Helping Hands, Salua and others like her would be roaming free, and people just like you would be helpless. This is because the Agency of Helping Hands is the only institution standing between humanity and is the only institution, which honestly, they haven't covered this in the series, but the fact that they say that leads me to believe that in that universe, it isn't the only agency that does stuff, that can do anything. Powerful inhuman beings intent on destruction. But due to recent funding cuts imposed by the federal government, AHHNASCU is in danger. This means you are in danger too. Such a great way to end a trailer, but you don't have to be. To learn more, contact us at the NorthAmericanPantheon.com, and an agency representative will reach out to show you how to lend a helping hand. 1828. So yeah, such a fun whatever trailer intro. And that's just the trailer for the channel. We have up to I think 5 stories right now. Baby Girl, the Harlequin, and I think some of these are just, they have 2 different names because some they're using the original like name of the Reddit story so that I think people can find it who are searching for that. And then, we have the Harlequin, Baby Girl, Numa, and the Bye Bye March. All of these episodes have been good so far. So, yeah, just I really, really cannot recommend it enough. Sorry, I know that was maybe took longer than just a quick shout out, but I wanted to talk about it again because now there's a few episodes out and I'm really excited about it. I want more people to watch it so I can have people to chat with it about. Anyways, but let's get back to the stories of the day. So the dancers at the club all knew my name, which from the art for the story, we can assume this is a strip club. And I will say, inherently a creepy title in that it implies that somebody who goes to somebody goes to this club enough to where the dancers all knew their name, which just usually implies that you're kind of a creep, or kind of I don't know, at least a purveyor of strip clubs. You're really into strip clubs, which normally doesn't mean that you're like a super, I don't know, wholesome guy, I guess I would say, or a woman, whoever's going to a strip club. But we don't even know. This story might be about a woman going to like a male strip club. We have no idea yet, right? But I'm assuming that the reason they all know this person's name is going to be a little bit more nefarious. Maybe I'm just speculating at this point off the title, but maybe the strip club is a part of hell. I mean, yeah, I'm getting that from the little demon silhouette of the little dancing demon here. Maybe this is one of those purgatory hell type places where you're just in this strip club all the time. You kind of wake up there and you think it's a great place or whatever, but it turns out it's actually a hell or a purgatory you're trapped in. So I'm thinking that could be a part, a path that this story might go down. I'm also thinking that the story could be some sort of supernatural, like it isn't just a strip club, you know what I mean? Like on the surface, maybe that's what it is, but secretly there are maybe some supernatural entities running it, or maybe they're sacrificing people in the basement. I don't know. It's just kind of the vibes I'm getting from the title and the what's-it-called, the thumbnail, the art for it. Well, let's get into it. Because I want to know what is going down. I felt the dry hum of my car's ancient engine under me as I sulked. My face was warm and ghoulish. I couldn't tell if it was from the heater or the drink flowing through my veins. My back felt like it had been prodded by 1,000 rusty nails. My vision stirred and wobbled, worse than a drunken sailor on leave. As the world started to come into focus, I heard the roar of a trillion raindrops gushing down. In the distance, the furious sky grumbled and flashed its lights. A violent wave was washing over me, egging my throbbing head. In the distance, the furious sky grumbled and flashed its lights. A violet wave was washing over me, egging my throbbing head on. Okay. I squinted and glanced out the front. A giant neon woman danced in the rain. She only knew one move, jumping up in the air with a wink and a cheer. She stood tall, her wired frame clinging to the crimson-toned roof of the joint. I shifted in my seat, examining my surroundings. I heard cars in the distance, but the haze of torrential downfall blocked all but the loudest of trucks. I studied the building in front of me. The neon woman did her simple routine atop the structure. It was one story, faded curtains drawn at every window and made of chipped brick that had seen better days. A bored but stern-looking bouncer stood by the front entrance, his clothes like shadows, blending into the misty night. Slivers of the playful light crept under the drawn shades, a mix of raw orange and rose red. I'm liking the mentioning of the colors from the violet light and the it's talking about the dancer doing one move. It's talking about like the neon sign and the fact that like it maybe has the girl like standing there or whatever and then she's like jumping up or whatever the move was that it said. But I like that because it does seem like our person, they're talking about that they're drunk, and my vision stirred and wobbled worse than a drunken sailor on leave. Does it say that they're drunk, or are they just? Because that does maybe affect, or the drink flowing through my veins. Yeah, so they are drunk. You know, they kind of come to in their car or just outside of the strip club. But what I like about that is because sometimes, especially on a night where you're inebriated and it's dark and it's raining, like sometimes you do notice colors more than actual like physical things, right? Like you might be walking by like a restaurant and just see the color of the lights and like the people dining inside, and all you really get of it is like a snapshot of it's like a yellow fluorescent glow, or it's maybe it's like a dark red, it's a bar or something like that. And I kind of, yeah, I like the use of color, at least right now at the beginning. And yeah, I think that a lot of times in stories, horror stories in particular, people tend to focus on the creepiness and the dreariness so much that they forget to just describe the color of things. They're so focused on the clouds or the whatever that they kind of like, they don't let us know, like, okay, they're in a forest. Are they evergreen trees? Are they brown, like, whatever, just like oak and, like those types of trees with, leaves, just kind of stuff like that. You know what I mean? And although this is a bar, this isn't outdoor setting. I like, or a strip club. I like that, it's still reminding us of the creepiness, but it's talking about the crimson toned roof, and the frame or the brick that had seen better days and stuff like that. It's doing the creepiness, but it's also, I think, just doing a good job with the image. I guess is my point overall. I shifted in my seat, examining my surroundings. I heard cars in the. Oh wait, I already read that. Mix of raw or. I could try to make out curvy silhouettes in the windows, swaying to an unheard beat that made the building hum with lust. I felt the fateful urge start to swell, those gorgeous forms so enticing. The bouncer stood below an awning, purple and outstretched like a red carpet in gold lettering. I could barely make out the name of the place. Bombshell Sally's? It was written in a crude cursive and ended in a cheeky wink with a heart. It was crude and run down, though in my sordid past I could easily call a place like this home. There was a club down near Southend I used to frequent before Aofi. It's an Irish name. I know that because I've read other Irish stories, but now it's such a familiar name that I'm wondering. I've read this name in other stories before because I've read from a few different Irish authors, but now I'm wondering, have I read? Because I know I've read Kaiju Fan before too, and so I'm like, have I read this exact story? Yeah, it's a mythological name, I think. Beauty Radiance. Okay.
Aoife.
Oh, that's what it is. Because I remember I pronounced it Aofi before, and I knew that wasn't right. So I wanted to Aoife. I kind of like Aofi better, but Aoife. My heart moaned at just the flickering thought of her name. Her petite frame popping into my mind. She had curly, strawberry blonde locks like she had danced out of an Irish folk song. She always had a warm smile and an even warmer touch. I am an artist by trade. I had gone through several models by the time we crossed paths. She was by far the most magnificent. She awoke feelings in me I never knew I had. We fell madly in love. I spent every waking moment with my darling. We had our rows, of course. What couple didn't? She had her frivolities that I tolerated, but all roads led back to me, her adoring paramour. Wouldn't she be your? I guess you can be each other's paramour. I was gonna say if you're the artist, wouldn't she be the paramour? But anyways, I guess it doesn't matter. Our parting had not been amicable. I had gone on a bit of a bender. Bits and pieces of my rampage remained in my head. Yet I couldn't form a picture to save my life. The sobering reality of it all began to crawl into me. I realized I had to hurry if I were to drown it. I wobbled out of the car, the night air brisk. The harsh downpour did nothing to help my drunken state. I scurried across the lot towards Sally's. Well, now, because he's like trying to drown his memory so bad, he almost doesn't sound just heartbroken. It sounds like he did something to Aoife. Um, you know what I mean? It sounds like he can't come to terms. Like if he sobers up, he'll come to terms with what he's done, and he can't have that. Like it doesn't sound like just a bad breakup, or you know. The bouncer regarded me with bored disdain, his eyes hidden by blackout shades. I feel like they already mentioned his sunglasses. Not a big deal, but it's just one of those things where like I feel like they could just say the bouncer regarded me with bored disdain, like from behind his blackout shades. He wore a burly leather jacket that smelled vaguely of cigars and coke. His head was clean shaven, his lips forming a permanent grimace. I approached the bouncer and he held out a hand. I forced a smile and straightened myself. "Good evening, sir," I remarked, careful not to slur too much. "I would like to enter this establishment, if you so please." "Adi," he said, he gruffly spoke, his expression unchanged. I fumbled around in my pockets, finally fishing out my wallet. I flashed a cheap plastic at him and he stepped aside. I waltzed right in like I owned the place. The grim lighting blinded me as I entered. I felt something lightly brush past my shoulders, a lingering sensation of warmth and familiarity. I swear I heard a sultry voice whisper into my ear. It said, "Welcome home." I turned around to face the voice, that distinct accent that had greeted me for so long. But I was met with nothing but a now sealed front door. Interesting. So it sounds like almost it was Aoife's like voice. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. Is that it was Aoife's voice, because it said it's like the voice that had greeted me for so long. So I'm thinking that the club is going to kind of fuck with him like that. Like it's gonna, like the dancers or whatever, he's gonna see her face in them. You know what I mean? So it might like try to pretend like, oh, we're gonna make you forget about her, but then he just is gonna actually keep reminding him of her and maybe like what he's done. So maybe it is some sort of like a punishment in that sort of sense. We'll see. Interesting though. I kind of like that. Immediately something weird is going on, because we haven't gotten anything yet to say that it's supernatural at all. But like the fact that you hear a voice, like typically you would walk into a strip club. Not that I've even been in one, but I've seen enough movies where you wouldn't hear anything but loud blaring music. So the fact that he thinks he hears this whisper of "Welcome home, Blake," and they know his name. Again, we have our title, but that already is, whether or not it was just in his head, it's already, keying us into this is a supernatural place. All right, I'm going to run to the bathroom really quick, and then we'll get back to the story. Sorry.
I can't remember. Well, no, that's when he gets killed. Before this actually might be night 1 or 2. He mentions that there was something called the Bite of 87.
That's like the first thing.
It sounds like such a meme saying that out loud. But
which whenever I heard that, I was like, the Bite of 87. I'm like, it's a fucking animatronic. People kept freaking out about that. I was streaming it, and people were like, "Oh, the Bite of 87," and I was like, it's a fucking animatronic biting you. Duh.
But do you not know about the meme, the Bite of 87?
No.
Okay, so the Bite of 87
I don't know anything.
The Bite of 87 has become a whole meme, and then while playing Five Nights at Freddy's 4, Markiplier, while he was playing it, like very loudly, there's a flashback sequence where it shows someone getting bit, which it turns out was actually in 1983. But Markiplier sees someone gets bit, and there's a long pause, and then he looks at the camera and dramatically yells, "Was that the Bite of 87?" So the phrase "Was that the Bite of 87?" became a meme.
Is there a clip of that still?
Yeah. Oh,
Editor,
there's a bunch.
For people that don't know this, play it now. Was that the bite of 87?
Anyway, all one of you. Anyway, so
dude, stop big leaguing me, man.
If you pull
big
it up
leaguing
and watch it right now, that's going to be everyone who hasn't seen it. Like that's the whole thing.
I don't have time watching. I don't have time watching a whole video. I'm just gonna
That's why we're doing this. Yeah, because you don't have time to watch.
Anyways, I thought you know what? Maybe the biggest thing it took away though, because I was like, this is actually a good game. It's kind of creepy, and it's been memed to death. I mean, I've seen these characters all over the internet since I've been on YouTube and stuff, whatever. But I will say, the Five Nights at Freddy movie absolutely 1,000,000% should have been found footage film. Like 1,000,000% should have been a found footage film. Because then, even if you leave the office, use your iPhone. Use iPhone camera footage, whatever. You know how much creepier it'd be if those things were standing there? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can use the same Jim Henson production shit, but it would look it would have been way more frightening.
I think there was a point in development where they kind of drifted away from frightening and wanted instead to be kind of like a Goosebumps for kids kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people liked, but it clearly wasn't like leaning into the horror side of the story.
Well, it's unfortunate because it is. And also too, the lore, I mean, like it felt very obvious when people were like, wait, what? Like when you were saying like, oh, people were speculating about the kids and stuff, it's like, it seemed very obvious.
God damn it. Fuck. Okay, sorry. Am I even still streaming? Sorry, I know I had it on mute there for a while. Since I went to the bathroom, which hopefully wasn't that long, but now it's off of mute. So skip forward to this part where you can see the audio back. Basically, I'm thinking that this guy's kind of a douchebag. That's what I'm going with. I gotta stop pressing mute on my shit. Ooh. All right. Yeah, I'm just the fact that he calls that he used to find women to model for him to be his girlfriends or whatever, like it just already shows a pattern of behavior that's kind of douchey, if not like almost predatory. So anyways, Candy comes out on stage. I'll talk about what I read because clearly I was on mute for a little while. A skinny, tired-looking blonde strolled out. She wore a bikini, caked up face. I recoiled away, trying to hide my disgust. Like, God, it's so douchey. Just fully a douche balloon, a doucheinator, I think. That's why I'm gone forever long. God, it's so douchey. Just fully a douche balloon, a doucheinator, a douche cocoon, maybe even. All right, so she reminded me of the girls before my muse, doe-eyed, and thinking they were the next big thing. Many of them were working girls, and it's like, even that thing where he's like, they were working girls, I would pick them out of the hole they danced around in, a futile attempt to make something of them, I suppose. Like, even the way how he's like, he's using them as models, but he's like, it was to make something of them. And it's like, are you hot shit, dude? I'm confused. Like, you're picking up working girls, as you say, to model for you for your art, but it's like, you know, other than maybe giving them a job or you not even giving them a job because you're treating them like your live-in model girlfriends, it's, you know, I have trouble. Now I'm thinking that this dude's just kind of a shitty, like, predator who would pick up girls and be like, oh, yeah, you want to model for me? You'll be my new girlfriend. And then, like, uses them for a while and then kicks them to the curb. Ugh, I do not like it. A few to make something of them, I suppose. Some of them well behaved. Even that line, like they're not children, but he's talking about them like they're a pet or like they're children. So gross. Others quite an annoyance. Like, yeah, he's talking about them like they're a friend's animal that he has to babysit. See, and even now he goes into, I would have to scold them like they were pouty children, telling them to sit there quietly and smile while I worked. Tiring creatures. The aspiring model. My muse was different. She could brighten a room. Yeah. I guess I didn't realize how douchey this guy was sounding in the beginning because I ascribed a lot of it to, like, just our author being musical, like, with their language and stuff. But the more I think about him as a narrator and the way he's talked about everything, like, even the idea of going into a strip club and saying, and I don't know where they are, maybe they are in, like, Ireland or something, I would like to enter this establishment if you so please. Even that, I'm like, who fucking goes into a strip club like that? You know, you say, oh, what's the cover charge? Or, you know, oh, I'm coming to get a dance, you know, like, yeah, I don't know, but it's just kind of baffling me now, now that I've kind of heard the type of guy he was before he met this love of his life, and just now how he's describing everything. I'm just like, you're doing a speed run to make want you to be murdered. And hopefully that does happen because it's a horror story. So my muse was different. She could brighten a room just by blinking, and was a modest girl, innocent even, not like the thing that wobbled on two legs before me. Aoife had been a dancer, or at least she wanted to. I caught one of her performances. It was all very nice, I suppose. It began to take up too much of my time, all the practicing and whatnot. I urged her away from it. She was losing herself in her silly hobby. Oh my god, as an this guy's an artist saying that to a girl who wants to be a dancer. And it's like, bro, what? Unless he's some hotshot great artist, he's still, the fact that he would call it a silly hobby, even in hindsight, is ridiculous. Eventually, she let go of her pipe dreams, and I reassured her I still loved her all the same. Watching Candy attempt a routine was just cringe, which now he's saying cringe, like, that's even more cringy. To call it cringe now, I'm like, at this point, you sound like such an uppity douchebag, just stick with that. But then you're like, watching Candy attempt a routine was just cringe. It's like, now I'm like, you seem like a freaking weird incel slash, you think you're, some gentleman of the world, and you're like a guy who pays working girls to model for you, yells at them, and then gets mad when you can't get an erection, sort of a thing. The poor thing looked strung out and was ghastly pale. As I watched her pathetic excuse for a dance, I found myself wondering, had I seen her somewhere before? There was something familiar with the apathetic look on her. When I studied her rather scrawny neck, I caught my gaze moving down toward her pale, flat stomach. I could tell you why that caught my attention, and I'm embarrassed at the rush of sensations that flooded my mind as I did. They were warm and cozy, like home. You never forget your first. Oh, gross. So he has slept with this girl. Of course, it wasn't her. She was long gone now. But just ogling her swaying form, the thought of sliding a dull finger across her smooth belly recalled such a delightful memory. I think this guy might have killed Aoife. I think he might be a serial killer now. The world around me snapped back into focus as the gorgeous bartender stepped between me and the stage. She had a bottle of scotch in one hand and an empty glass in the other. Fill your tank, she offered. He anticipated my response and popped the glass down and filled it up. The musty scent of aged vinegar lingered in the air as she poured. She pushed the glass of booze toward me, and I drank it up. It burned going down my gullet, and I felt my insides twist and struggle against the poison tide. I winced as I slammed the empty glass down. It rattled on the shoddy bar as it did. The lights around me were brighter and throttled my aching vision. I squinted as the bartender leaned in, resting her pretty little head on her hands. You look like they just dragged you out of the harbor, she said in an exaggerating Southie accent. Yeah, I don't know if this is American or, because Southie could mean, I think could be an Irish term, but then it's also I think like Boston. I think Southie, I've heard that. Why the long face, stranger? She asked. I avoided her gaze. Those hazel orbs bore down on me. She was everything. She just had to. I shook my head as I mumbled, it doesn't matter. Just keep 'em coming. I tapped the glass, and the tender obliged. As the world began to sway and tilt, I felt a chill tickle. I felt a chill tickle the nape of my neck, like I was being observed on all sides. The scotch continued to fight me all the way down, but I drank whatever the tender served. She just kept pouring, this devilish sneer on her face. I leaned on the counter, balancing on the wobbly stool. I felt clawed and calloused hands grip my shoulders. Out of the corner of my eyes, I saw that dolled-up creature standing behind me, her ghastly visage worse up close. I tried to shrug her off, but she tightened her grip, digging her nails into my shoulder. "Care for a dance, lover boy?" she said in a monotoned way, and there was a twinge of remembrance that flashed in my mind. It vanished as quickly as it came. "No, I'm good," I grunted as I shook her off. "Come on, just one dance to remember me by." She slid an arm around my waist. What's up? What's up, Harold? Things have been good, man. How have you been? I see you've been posting a lot of videos, dude. That's awesome. Good to have you here. Just reading a story about some. I think the guy might be a serial killer, but also this strip club might be like a hell that he's trapped in. I'm not sure. But anyways, he is a douche regardless. We have confirmed that. "Come on, one dance to remember me by." She slid an arm around my waist. It felt bony and cold. I winced and tried to wriggle my way out as the tender laughed at my expense. "Get off of me." I said no, I roared at the annoying twat. "Ah, come on now, Blake," the tender started. A flash of frenzied pink darted across her irises. "Just smile and nod. It's the proper way to behave," she cooed. I froze at that place, that fateful mannerism. My eyes widened as the heat from the overhead lights quickly became unbearable. "What did you—" I started to whisper, but the quick whisk of a straight razor sailing across my throat gurgled my thoughts. Candy stepped away from me, her ghostly eyes emitting a piercing glow. She was smiling, soaking in my panicked chortling as my hands clung to my neck. So she did just slit his throat. Oh, shit. Things are heating up. About a douche disguised as a killer. Yeah, I mean, because we know he broke up with his girlfriend, and it just seemed to me that there was something he wasn't telling us. But yeah, that's good, man. That's good that you've been writing too. Good to hear. Yeah, I saw you posted I saw the post on your YouTube for the Man on a Mountaintop, or I think that's what the series is called. My apologies if that's not right, but that's great. I didn't know you had ever. I mean, you probably didn't stop. Maybe you were just taking a break, or maybe you were just busy with other things. But that's good that you are writing again. If you did take a break, I'm happy to hear it, man. She was smiling. I collapsed to the ground, the world dancing around me as I bled out the jeers of the club. I didn't recognize the flowing fluid pouring onto the floor at first, but as the void began to overtake me, I recalled that wonderful iron scent. See, yeah, now it's clear, because he talks about the stomach earlier and what a memory it was, and he's like, of a finger going across the stomach, but it seemed like he was talking about cutting someone. And the way he was talking about, I used to pick up working girls to model for me for my artwork. The whole thing was like, it all seemed like thinly veiled ways of talking about murdering someone. And then he had his muse that he that he loved. And so yeah, I'm not surprised to now hear him say, I recalled that wonderful iron scent. And it's like, this is my guess, a woman murderer guy who would murder women and call it his art. And then this is his like come up, and either this is hell or this is like women who knew what he was doing and they like set a trap for him. Candy knelt down and turned me over, ripping my shirt up. She plunged the rusty blade into my soft underbelly. She never once looked away from my dying visage. She took glee in it, and right before the pain came to a sudden yet stinging end, I remember where I had seen her before. As I said, you never forget your first. Yeah, so he killed that this Candy girl was like the first working girl or model, aspiring model that he killed, and essentially his ruse as a killer was to be like, oh, I'm an artist, I'm looking for models, which we've all seen that Criminal Minds or that Law and Order. That I feel like that's a common thing now, where the guys are, oh, come to my apartment, blah blah blah. Oh, yeah, you're beautiful, like blah blah blah. You could model, and then like, it's all just a pretense to get them to come somewhere, and then they either like, chloroform them, choke them out, or just kill them right there. I awoke to a startling sound. The club DJ was roaring away. I was sitting back on my wobbly stool. A pain still lingered on my throat and belly. Yet when I went to examine the damage, there was nothing but a slightly raw scar tissue. I looked around me. The club was empty, save myself, the tender, whistling away while she pretended to clean a dirty mug. It feels like the house that Jack built. Yeah. I have not seen the house that Jack built, but I know a little bit about the premise. I should watch it. It's from what I understand, it's a great movie. Some stuff, and I've gone around to finishing The Last Man on the Mountaintop. I guess I got overwhelmed, but I'm past that now. That's good, man. Don't we all have lots of irons in the fire, lots of creative endeavors, but yeah, don't burn yourself out, don't get too overwhelmed, do what you can. I try to stream once a week, but even this week I almost didn't, because it's just a 3-day weekend, and I was like, well, I could stream Sunday night because I don't work, but then I almost didn't because just mental health is more important, and yeah, I've got a poem that I want to work on. I've got a short story that I don't write nearly as much as most of the other writers on this subreddit, so like I feel all the time inferior by how much you guys are cooking things out. Like the fact that you've finished Last Man on the Mountaintop, and I remember it was like only a few months ago, probably, when I read the first part of it. Like, that's infinitely faster than anything I make. I mean, I feel kind of shitty even calling myself a writer sometimes, because it's like, how often do I actually write? But I also work full time, and like, writing is my passion. So like, if I'm not a writer, what else am I? I do love it. I do want to do it. So you can't be too hard on yourself, man. You really, you got to do things at their own pace, and you can't like, you can't expect to be able to do everything, either. So that's why I've stopped making myself feel shitty for either starting a project or not finishing it, or having an idea but not getting around to actually writing it. Like, I don't know. I just hope that someday I'll be in a position where I'll have the time and I'll have the security and the money and the resources to just sit down and grow creatively like I want to. But I also can't sit there and like judge myself and make myself feel bad, because ultimately that leads to nowhere. That leads to no work getting done. I, got less, less done when I was that hard on myself. So yeah, I get it, man. That's all I'm saying. I get it, As long as words come, you're still a writer. There was Octavia Butler who woke up at 2 a.m. to write for a few hours before she went out to her day job. Yeah, and Octavia Butler is a great author. I love, was it Hindered? I forget what her first book is. Amazing. I've listened to that. I love her first book, and then I also had to read Dawn in college, and from what I remember of Dawn, I really liked it. Which is like her. She is a science fiction writer, but that was like a very science fiction-y book, and I remember that being one of the first books to where I really was like, I don't know, it was in college, and it was like before I really got into like a lot of horror and fantasy stuff, and I just remember that book of Dawn being so interesting, about like just gender and feminism, feminine roles versus male roles, and then these aliens abduct her, and all sorts of stuff, and it was just a very interesting book. I liked that part of college, when we were reading it. It was super cool. And yeah, Octavia Butler, she's obviously one of the goats. I think she's not only a great writer, but I think she's one of those great examples of people who just, she was a normal, everyday person, and then slowly but surely she became one of the most influential writers of our time, like, and that's awesome. So there is scar tissue on his. So that's making me think that he's just going to be killed over and over again by these women at this club. I looked around me. The club was empty save myself and the tender whistling away while she pretended to clean a dirty mug. She caught me staring, and she broke out into a cheerful squeal. She brought out a big bottle of brandy and shoved it towards me. Bottoms up. Have a hair of the dog that bit you. Have a hair of the dog that bit you. I could see her teeth. Her grin was wide and joyous. I swiped the bottle off the counter. It shattered into pieces at my feet. What is this? She can't have been here, I snapped at her. That'll have to go on your tab. She ignored my request, grumbling at the wasted brandy. I started to get up, but she grabbed my arm and twisted. She pulled me back down, and I looked at her with vexation. This wild filly sure thought she was all that. Next event is only seconds away, Blake. You wouldn't want to miss it, she giggled. Hey, 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 party people, the DJ boomed as if on cue. Give it up for our next performer, Brandy with an eye. She roared as my blood ran colder than the depths of hell. From the stage came the next girl. She was short, built like a Mack truck, dark-skinned and brandishing a kitchen knife. She was also... Oh, okay, this is a typo right here. I was like, I kept reading this in my head being like, am I just reading this wrong? She also had one solid gray eye, her other socket hollowed with rot. But it says she was also. So we got a quick typo here, Kaiju. Just be aware of that. She also had one solid gray eye, her other socket hollowed with rot. She darted across the stage, scanning the empty room until she set her sight on me, her face contorted in a fury few had ever known. I staggered back, recognizing this horrid creature well. Recognizing this horrid creature well. She leapt off the stage and landed with an audible thud. I looked around the room for anything to defend myself with. The crackling of glass. See, I think this part is the part of the story where, I don't know, maybe the writer was going through a bit fast, because now I'm finding a few typos, like the crackling of glass give way to a slip as I fell back, where shouldn't it be the crackling of glass gave way to a slip as I fell back. Brandy leered over me with the knife, a navy blue wig atop her head. Her eyes gave off this hellish glow as she pursed her lips in a barbaric snarl. "Evil motherfucker," she growled at me as she raised the knife and plunged it into my chest with a roar. I let out a gasp as the blade pierced my heart, Brandy digging the knife as far as it would go. Salty trails ran down her face, and she just kept swearing at me. She dug the knife out and kept on stabbing. She was an amateur with it, flying at my chest cavity with wild fury. She carved hole after hole into me. There was no method, only madness. Frankly, the sloppy work offended me more than anything. I would have said as much if blood wasn't filling my lungs, bubbling out of my mouth in a foamy mess. Finally, she grew tired of poking holes in me and rose the blade above my head. I swear it glistened off the rabid light, a deadly twinkle smirking at me. She drove it down, and I felt the tip burst into my cornea. She slowed her descent, taking pride in slowly digging into the gooey center of my retina. The pain was unbearable. What little vision remained was just flashes of gore and vengeful steel. Out of the corner of my remaining eye, I saw the raven-haired girl staring down at me, a look of smug disdain on her once hazel eyes, now bright pink. So this has happened before where her eyes have like changed color, and I'm wondering what that means. Part of me thinks that, like, again, I was talking about the glamour effect that maybe she is like doing on him, which, I mean, he's obviously stuck there, so I don't know why she would need to be like doing that, but maybe it's an indication that like she's hiding her identity, and maybe we are going to discover that this is Aoife, that the bartender was his like muse the whole time, and he killed her too, and so she's going to be like the last one, but she gets to watch all the other girls kill him first, sort of thing. That's one option I'm thinking. I'm also just thinking maybe that like this is the bartender is kind of the vengeful goddess, like allowing all these women who were murdered by this man to like get their retribution on him. So she is just like enjoying the show, like she is the one who brought his spirit here to be tortured, sort of a thing. Now a bright pink, her skin a shade of ashen blue. I could taste sulfur and iron in my mouth. And as Brandy collapsed, breaking down next to me, I just craved the empty embrace of death. Of course, I awoke again, and again, and again. Each time my wounds had healed like nothing had happened. Each time the tender offered me a foul-tasting drink. Eventually, I would awake to her forcing it down my mouth. A sadistic laugh echoing around me as I choked on the strange brew. The DJ was taunting me, and the charade slowly collapsed as the woman attacked me with monstrous frenzy. Looking a little worse for wear there, Marcus? Who's Marcus? I'm very confused by this use of Marcus. His name is not Marcus. Like, that's not it's Blake. Unless it's like Marcus Blake or something like that. But looking a little worse for wear there, Marcus. How about you give a warm welcome to Ember? She sure has one for you. She smelt like singed flesh and charred remains, and after stabbing me and dousing me, she made sure I did as well. Come on out, Sandy, and cut him a new move. Cut him a new move. Sandy was a leggy blonde. She dug her high heels into my skull, making mincemeat of my innards as she danced on my grave. Cut him like the disgusting pig he is, Rachel, a fiery redhead. She had a hot temper. She had been difficult. She liked to box in her spare time. It hadn't saved her, of course. She beat me to death with her bare hands and tore me apart. Each time I awoke, it was like being jolted back from the brink. I was weaker, paler, like a piece of my soul had been torn from me and tossed into the abyss. There were so many, you see. And again, I think there's another typo here, but he says there were so many, you see. It says it was slow to recall them at first, but I think the author means I was slow to recall them at first. So another typo here, I'm pretty sure. I was slow to recall them at first, but I knew each and every one of them. Dare I say, intimately. It was rare they knew me. Maybe a quick glance at the gym or a vague recollection of being eyed across the bar. I would pitch them woo and beg to paint their portrait. I'm guessing pitch them woo just means like hit on them. I would pitch them woo and beg to paint their portrait. More often than not, they took the bait. A lot of them had worked the corners. No one missed them. I would subdue them, then take them to a quiet place and did what I did best. I would use frail tissue as canvas and paint my heart's content, sculpt their flesh into something wonderful. And see, I get that at the beginning he just calls himself an artist, and yeah, I almost don't know if we need like him describing that he paints with their blood and sculpts their flesh to his heart's content, like, because we already got that by the fact that they're murdering him now, and the fact that he's like, the blood smelled so wonderful even though it was my blood, you know. So I just don't know if we need I guess it is from his point of view, so it makes sense that he would like reminisce about how he murdered each of these women that are now murdering him. But I don't know. I don't know. It's fine. I get like I think some people would probably like it, but I'm just like, at this point I'm like, yeah, I know. I know I know he murdered them, you know. But I guess it is good to have him kind of like confirm it. I don't know. Sometimes they would awaken during. That was part of the thrill. I would take my trusty switchblade, press it against their cheek. That was usually enough. Over the years, I experimented and tweaked my craft. The urge, the yearning to admire and explore every crevice of my models haunted my every waking moment. It became a slogging chore, really, scratching that itch. The bottomless pit of my own depravity was starting to shock even myself. So I took some me time, traveled the world and the eastern seas. Again, he's just so douchey, like, even the way he's like, I get it because we are supposed to hate him, and the story's doing a good job of making us hate him. But I also am just like, shut up and die, bitch. Like, I almost don't even want to hear all this stuff from him because I'm just ready for him to. I guess that's the point, is we need to get to the final girl that he like actually loved, because then maybe that's the point where maybe he's not where he's gonna feel regret, but where he's going to, like, I don't know, just be in more of a hell and quit talking about how, oh, I was starting to shock even myself, so I took some me time, traveled the world in the eastern seas. Of course, my time abroad didn't do much to quell my urges. Something Kamiko took great pleasure in reminding me as she disemboweled me, my guts spilling into my hands like a pile of steaming spaghetti. I didn't really know these models, and my lack of interest had started to show in my work, so I promised myself I would really get to know my next model. Enter Aoife, sweet, timid, trusting Aoife. I swept her off her feet. She latched onto my cold black heart. She was so kind, so caring. I lavished her with affection and praise, and she lapped it up like a needy pup. Her neediness was such a godsend. Her adoration filled a hole in my chest I didn't even know I had. Then, of course, it all went to hell when she found my paintings. Many murders at the hands of these scorned specters were starting to wear me down. I awoke once more, sprawled on the filth-stained floor. A spittle of drool inched out of my mouth, and my head was still whirling from the sensation of being split open with a tire iron. My whole body ached and cracked. It had been battered and molded back together so many times now. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the tender, smirking at me, my jailer. She leered over me, this ravenous look in her eyes. She was getting a sick pleasure out of watching me suffer, I'm sure of it. I wasn't about to let her get the satisfaction of breaking me, so I pulled myself up to face her. She began pouring me some foul concoction, but I snatched it out of her hand and broke the bottle against the counter. I brandished my makeshift dagger like a raving loon. Her nonchalant demeanor never wavered. You seem dissatisfied with the service, she remarked. Cut the shit. What is this? This madness, I bellowed. Just a taste of your own medicine, killer, she mocked me. I roared and swiped the broken bottle at her, hitting nothing but air with the lingering scent of strawberries. I was alone once more, even the braying DJ was abruptly silent. The air around me was tense and accusing. I began to hear nasty, jealous whispers. They told me I would burn for my crimes. They would be there to watch me choke on my last breath. Meaningless scorn, really. After all, I had died before. They had burned me, stabbed me, torn me limb from limb. Whatever this place was, despite all the pain and torment, I just got back up again. I laughed at their vicious mockery. The bile these wretched souls spewed. I would escape their endless torment and take my time with the tender. Oh yes, a beauty such as she surely had such sights to show me. The thought of peeling my captor's tan skin from her hide distracted me, and I didn't hear the dainty steps of someone creeping behind. Blake? Soft voice whispered, and my bloodthirsty delusion shattered. I turned to see bloodshot eyes staring at me. Mascara ran down her pale, freckled cheeks. A lump formed in my throat, and I almost looked away, but something forced me to commit my work to memory. Her neck was still a deep purple. You could make out every indent where my hands had been. The thing that stung me to the core, she didn't look angry. There was no malice or fury on her face. She just looked sad. Guilt washed over me. Perhaps for the first time in my life, cutter fell from my hands and clattered to the ground. I collapsed to my ears, or I collapsed to my knees, tears starting to swell. Aoife looked down on me, her face shifting with betrayal and pity. I took her hands, her deliciously soft hands, and wept into them. So stood frozen for a moment, then quickly pulled back. I looked at her, her mournful eyes like shimmering emeralds. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, my beloved. My beloved, my treasured muse. I cried out. She was silent at my grief. I tried to hold her to gain any sort of comfort, but she recoiled away at my touch. Behind her, the tender lurked. Horns had sprouted from her head, curled and rimmed like a mountain goat. She gently touched his shoulder. He shuddered at first, but then calmed herself. She leaned into my beloved ears and whispered poison into them. Poison? How is it poison? It's fucking, you killed her. Is she lying? Or is, I'm confused, I'm not really confused, but I'm saying, like, I'm sure she just, like, killed that guy. He deserves it. That's not poison. That's the truth, Aoife took a deep breath, her bruised neck shifting as she swallowed her fright. You can't even name one thing you loved about me, can you? She whispered. I scoffed at the accusation, and the she-demon that tormented me had to try harder than that. Of course, your beauty outshines even the sparkle of the sun. Your hair is like the fires of the phoenix. I waxed, only to be shoved away from her. I'm talking about me, what I like, who I was, my dreams. I wanted to dance, and you took that from me, she said, her voice chiller than a newborn frost. I tried to defend myself, to explain it all, but I never got the chance. This is back to our narrative. Yeah, I tried to defend myself, to explain it all, but I never got the chance. She lunged at me, a surprising strength in her grip. The heartbreaking betrayal in her emeralds had been replaced by a fiery contempt as she wrapped her tiny hands around my throat. It was an odd sensation, this tiny woman attempting to throttle the life out of me. I could feel my airway tighten and closed, the last breath I could muster flying out of my nostrils as I gasped. I could feel my face begin to warm, the blood rushing to it at a speedy pace. My eyes bulged as they filled with fluid. I was trapped in her deadly vice. Even she seemed surprised at how easy it had been. I thudded my hands at her side, a useless gesture. The world around me became bloody static. My muse's face contorting in righteous rage. The she-demon was beside her, gently encouraging her. The raven-haired demon regarded me with contempt and spoke her final insult to me. I've been looking for you for a long time. I doubt you remember her name, and I doubt you care what she meant to be. I figured this little preview was the least I could do. It's not much comfort for them, your models. But damned if seeing you lie there doesn't make me feel good at least, she spat at me. With that, I sunk into the inky void, my last thoughts still lingering on my beloved Aoife. I didn't awake again, not there anyway. I was drifting in an endless void. I felt restless spirits pass me by, their anger quenched as they passed on, yet their hatred lingered, stamped onto my soul. Eventually, reality snuck back into being, ironically. I saw a bright light, and I clawed my way to it. That light gave way, another typo, gave way to a flower print room that smelled like ammonia and the elderly. I was tucked into a bed, stale blankets holding me in place. I tried to get up, but was stopped by a rattle of cuffs shackling me to the bedpost. My left leg To my left leg was an EKG machine mindlessly beeping. I grunted as I rattled my chains, my whole body feeling like I had been run through a blender. I heard an audible gasp from the doorway, and the nurse rushed out to get someone. I expected some doctor to come in, tell me I was going to be all right. Imagine my surprise when a detective walked in, grim pleasure plastered on his shaven face. He read me my rights and rattled off a list of charges. I sank deep into bed, not having the will to defend against the truth. As he left, he turned back, sporting a smug look. I'm glad you woke up. Maybe they'll let me stick the needle in you myself. With that, he walked off. The next few months were a tiresome blur. I sleepwalked through my brief trial. The skirt-wearing ADA let the evidence speak for itself. Supposedly, after I had slaughtered my muse, her words, not mine, I was consumed with guilt for the heroic nature of my crimes and went on a binge that resulted in a car crash. They were pulling me from the wreckage where her body was found, along with my fantastic paintings. It didn't take long for them to put two and two together and capture the South End Ripper. Was lauded with praise and outrage it hadn't been sooner. I was in a coma for several weeks. Cops, feds, reporters, and who knows who else, in and out, just waiting to pounce the moment I awoke, if at all. My public defender tried to plead insanity, and on appeal tried to argue it once more. That fell on deaf ears, of course, and so I sit on the Green Mile, awaiting the day of my execution. That sordid purgatory I found myself in, I remember it still. I would have thought the fond memories of my deeds would comfort me in these final days, but they're tainted by that awful place. Every time I tried to recall the warm feeling of blood on my face, I cringe pain at the memory of my throat being slit, my skin burning, my heart aching at the sight of my muse rejecting me. Those memories are worthless. My legacy shattered. She took it all from me, that damn demon. I don't know who she was, but I have an irking feeling that she bore a striking resemblance to that courtroom skirt, ADA Masters, whose hazel eyes bore into me with such hatred, such familiarity. It's only a few days now, and I'll see that demon again, mocking me behind the two-way glass as they strap me down and stick the needle in. Sometimes she appears in my dreams, counting down the days, laughing at me with the rest of my models. I don't know why I write this down now. My final confession, I suppose. I wonder what that numbing fluid I wonder when that numbing fluid starts flowing through me, when the arms of Hades come to drag me down below, will she be waiting there? That raven-haired horror tending the strip club of the damned, eagerly awaiting my arrival so she can do it all again. I guess I'll find out soon enough. That was fun. That was like, I have to say that although I didn't like the narrator, obviously, like, you know, he's a murderer, and then he was just such a kind of douche, especially even in the beginning before we knew that he was a murderer. I have to say that, like, that doesn't really take away from the story because he got his comeuppance. And the thing that I like about this sort of a story is he got the punishment in life, but then he got caught or whatever, only to then be waiting to know that he's going back to that same horrible place that he fears. And so it really is this sort of like ultimate retribution or ultimate like punishment. Like, what could the ultimate punishment be for somebody who does these horrible things? And it's like, yes, to have him know that like all his victims are going to be torturing him for an eternity, and like taking their power back over him and taking it back from him, and getting over on him, and then that demon's just going to be there laughing at him. So to have already experienced that, and then to have to live out the rest of your days knowing that that's what you're going to face, is a pretty awesome kind of like retribution justice for these women. So I definitely like that aspect of it too. I do think if I had to give this story some notes, I think the bartender should have talked more, and not just so much like, "Oh, come on, Blake," or this or that. And I don't get the use of Marcus at the end at all, but like, "Oh, come on, Blake, just stay. The next dance is coming right up." Like that's fine. She was taunting him and like feeding him the bad scotch and all that stuff, but I kind of wished there was just a little bit more to her character. I don't know what that more is necessarily, but like, you know, like, I don't, like, maybe at first she's like, look at the legs on her, or something. Like, I don't know, just something to where she's like, she's clearly cluing him into the fact that this is like one of his victims or something. I don't know. I just think that there's more when you have an interesting character like a demon who is also took the form of this ADA that puts him in prison. When it comes to like having like an interesting character like that, I just would maybe like to see a little bit more done with it, other than her just like giving him drinks and like laughing at his pain. And with the pink eyes, obviously, I thought that was like, I mean, I guess it did go somewhere. It just went that she was a demon, but she kind of was like the good version of a demon, in the sense that like, oh, demons' jobs are to punish people that go to hell. So in that sense, it's like, and they're only deserving people, you know, punishing them. So in that type of sense, they're like, you're like, oh, well, demons seem kind of dope then, if like it's their job to, you know what I mean? And so you kind of have that interesting take on a demon, where it's a demon of like retribution and stuff like that. And so I guess I maybe would have liked to see a little bit more done with it. I don't know fully what that could have been, but yeah, it's just kind of a thought that I had. And then also I do think the end, I think once you have the kind of montage of women coming out and killing him, and then you have the part with like, you don't need to have the part where he's like, oh, I sculpted their bodies and painted. I think you could maybe just say something quickly about he would murder these women, but then he would also paint their corpses. So I do think you can kind of get that in there. But then I think once you have him murdered by the one person that he actually cared about and that he actually felt guilt over killing, and what like did him in the end, once you have that, I think you can just kind of have him wake up in the hospital, and then the stuff about the end, and he's about to be murdered on death row, and that he doesn't know, you know, he hates being in prison and hates being on death row, but he's gonna hate it more after he dies. So like, you know, something like that. I don't know if you need like the part where he yeah, urban spook twist with him painting the corpses. Yeah, and I don't know if you need just the parts kind of in between where he's like, you know, oh, I woke up again and I was determined not to let the bartender, my jailer, torture me any longer, and I was gonna show her depravity or blah blah blah. Because like this is just a story ultimately about the bad guy getting his comeuppance, even if it is in the afterlife, and that's where the horror of it comes in. The horror comes in the sort of torture of him, and then also this idea that you think the whole time he's in hell, right? You think this is already his hell, but then he wakes up from it, and so that's kind of the twist of the story. So just maybe to have that part, like, I don't know, come right after, like, Aofi kills him, and not to have, like, I don't know, I just feel like he kind of ruminated too much. You know what I mean? And I get it, he's like, maybe he's supposed to be reliving stuff, because, like, then at the end he finally is, like, regretful. But even that, it's like, you know, I just don't care. I just want him to die. I just want him to die again, you know. I want him to get killed. I like the touch about the ADA was the demon and stuff like that. I think that's all cool. But like this idea of him drifting in an endless void and then ironically a light, you know, stamped onto my soul. Like some of these lines are fine and are good, but like I just don't care about that he was in an endless void and then he came out of it because he was in a coma. I would rather have him wake up the last time and be like, oh my God, here we go again. But then he realizes he's in a hospital and he thinks he's been saved. He thinks that it was all just a bad dream and that he's going to go back to being able to murder women, only to realize that he's in custody and, you know, all the stuff. And I think it would be even better, rather than this detective that we've never met before, why not have the ADA there when he wakes up and be like, I'm going to be the one to put you away, you know, and I'm going to be the one to get them to give you the needle. And then after that, so then the demon is kind of existing in reality too for him. So then that's probably even scarier because he doesn't know if is it the demon from his dreams or is, you know, whatever. And then to have him at the end be like, I don't know what's worse, the fact that I'll have to see her and I see and he could be like, I see my victim's face in every woman I see Aofi and the ADA, the demon, and all my other victims. And so I don't know what's worse, that I'll have to see all their faces as I'm being killed, like lethal injection, as he's being put to death, or that I know that I'll see them once I wake up, and that I'll get to see them in the neon lights of the strip club of the damned, you know. I think that would be like a little bit more of an impactful ending, because we get that he's fucked either way, like we do get that, but I just think it the story, I don't know if this made sense, but it kind of not appeased, but what's the word that means, it kind of like entertained the author too much, like, or not the author, the narrator, this antagonist who's our narrator. It kind of, and I get it because it's his story, he is the one writing it, but yeah, I think that it could have still been him writing it with him being like, I know that I'm in hell on earth for my crimes and I deserve it, but then I also know that an even worse hell is awaiting me once I'm killed, sort of a thing. I don't know. But that's just my general thoughts on it. I think that a lot of people will probably really like this story just the way it is, and I like it just the way it is. And there were some typos and stuff, but I think overall it's like well written, and it's a nice thought out like horror about justice. And justice can be horrifying. I mean, the thing that I think, some people look at this and go like, oh, it's just about the bad guy getting his comeuppance. That's not really horror, in the same way that just people being killed for no reason is horror, right? Because one, you're like, oh my God, why do humans do these horrible things to each other? And in this one, you're at least like, well, he deserves it, right? But I think that's kind of a too basic reading of these types of stories. And I think that like the horror is in the depravity that people can do to each other, and then the depravity that can be totally justified and that we can all find comfort in. And the fact that there is a sick part in all of us, because we all hear about a guy like this who murders all these women, and we go, oh, I'd chop off his balls. Oh, I do. People say this fucked up shit that he clearly deserves. But the point is like, we are still wanting to do torture, to do violence on somebody. And that is still horrific from their point of view. And so I think that's like a much more interesting space to live in, and to kind of explore the horrors of justified or not, like executions, and stuff like that. And so I think, I do think that not enough stories do it, like not enough stories have a sort of, maybe not happy ending, but like just ending where the bad guy gets his comeuppance. They just try to be as like fucked up as possible. Like, think like the original Baraska 4 ending where like, Cole just leaves town and or whatever his name is. Maybe it's Sam. I forget his name. Where he just leaves town and kind of nothing happens, and like Kyle's brain dead or dead. We don't really know. And like Kimber got away, but everything's all fucked and all that, Like, I think so many horror stories try to have that be the end because it is the more sad ending for that. But I think you can have just as good horror and just as good, like, fucked up, unsettling shit while having there still be some retribution or some justice. I think that you can do both and it can still be good horror. I just think it's a matter of like, what am I in the mood for? And I like stories about retribution. One of the stories that I have been playing around with for a long time is kind of a retribution killer like this, and it's not like a straight up Boondock Saints thing where we're just gonna murder everybody that we think is evil, or every like killer mafia guy we're gonna murder. But it is kind of this sense of like, when is somebody justified in stooping to that level, or in completely going off the rails and becoming a murderer themselves, even if it's a serial murder and they're murdering like multiple people. Like, if they're murdering, like, I don't know, let's say P words, child predators, like, is that justified? I would say that the world would probably be a better place if there was a superhero out there doing that, or a person out there doing that. And that's like, my story kind of plays with a similar concept. But it is ultimately just about like retribution for what someone suffered. And I think that can be great horror too, I guess, so to speak. So I like the story overall. I think that it's a fun premise. It's interesting, and it's one that I think on the initial level, people might think it's kind of basic, but I think when you peel it back and you show it from the different angles, and you show that like ultimately all these women got murdered like unjustifiably, but then in hell, if they are in hell, so to speak, which I don't believe that these women just for being, dancers or whatever would go to hell, but it's like then they get to be the ones who are violent and who murder the person that did wrong to them, which is great and is retribution, but then also at the same time, it's like their souls are filled with hate and all that stuff. So it's like, are they in a hell of their own too? Because they're just reliving this trauma that was done to them. They can't escape it. Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the other thing too. Then the question becomes, if we're talking about like real world vigilantism, like Harold says, like then you have to worry about the people caught in the crossfire, the mistakes, if the state can convict people, put them to death, and then realize years later, oh, we were actually wrong, that person was innocent. It's very easy for a single person to be wrong about somebody or to, make mistakes or, whatever. And so that's where the issue with vigilantism comes in. And that's why, of course, I don't like condone, vigilantism like that. But I do think it's a really interesting concept for like a horror character, right? Or for a horror story is when such unspeakable horror is done to you or someone you love or whatever, some type of horror is justified in response, right? Some type of retribution is justified. And so, but where is that line? And if the person, what if the person carrying it out enjoys it? What if they just enjoy killing? What if they don't even care and they just are like a Dexter where they're like, I'm going to pick the bad people because that's more morally acceptable, but I really am just doing it because I enjoy the feeling of taking another life like that, then you get into all the crazy shit with it. And again, anti-hero, Dexter's an anti-hero. I would say that this demon in this story is an anti-hero. But at the same time, kind of dope ones, and like you kind of agree with them, at least maybe not Dexter so much, especially throughout the course of that show, but I'm just saying that it's a fun place to live in when you're telling a horror story, because you can get a lot of people on the side of the one doing the crimes or doing the horrible things. It's a way, to flip the script, and I always like a good script flip, so to speak. But yeah, that's all I'll say about it. I think it was a good story. I have, my thoughts on it, and thank you so much to Kaiju Fan 22, because this was a fun read, and they're a great author who's been around for a while, who's continuing to write new stuff, and just shout out to them. And thank you so much for letting me read it. And I hope you watch this at some point. I don't know if you will, but you were somebody who let me read my stories read your stories way back in the day, like when I was still streaming on Twitch or whatever else. So the fact that I got to read another one of your stories now, like a year later or so, or even more probably on YouTube is awesome. It just is cool to have the same people. It's a sense of community that I have some of the same people still submitting stories to me, whatever, a few years later. That's awesome. That makes me go like, wow, time flies, but it's also just so cool. It's a great reminder to just keep at it and to keep working, because this story was great. It was very fun. And again, I think it is one of those ones that it's like, you could just, if you had a bad day, where like you heard about a guy doing something horrible to a woman, like this sort of story can be cathartic. You know, it can really maybe help somebody who's like, these assholes never get their comeuppance. And to just read a story about one who does, even though it's from his point of view, can be really like satisfying, I feel like, and good for the soul sometimes. So shout out to you. Good job. Great. Oh, well, I'll go back later. I'll upvote it, but or actually, I don't think I can upvote it because it's archived. Yeah, it's locked. But go follow Kaiju Fan 22, people. They're a very prolific writer in the Creepcast community and on the different discords and subreddits. I see them popping in and submitting for competitions and stuff all the time, and it's just cool to see. All right, on to Devil's Den Part Dose. We are going to be, this is part 1. We are going to be on part 2. I think this is part 2. Here, I'll click on it again, but just to make sure. All right, so just to do a quick recap for anyone who wasn't here when I read Devil's Den Part 1. It starts out as kind of a classic like childhood coming of age story where this one kid, it kind of reminded me of The Showers, and that the kid is like really into storytelling and really into I forget what the monster is called. It might be called the something devil. It's not like the Jersey Devil, but it's some sort of monster like that, where essentially the kid is really into it. He gets a friend, Leroy, I believe his name is, who's like the first black kid to move into his rural neighborhood, and they strike up a really powerful like friendship where even their families become friends and whatever. It's this kind of fun just childhood, story at the beginning. But they want to find proof. They want to kind of be like monster hunters, and I think they're maybe like 11 or 13 or something when they go on a camping trip with the main character's father, who is like a park ranger, right? And his dad has told him the stories about this creature and that it's like common in the folklore, and him and Leroy are like, we want to find it. We want to find proof of it. But basically they're just out on a camping trip. And the creature just kind of finds them. It's nothing. It seems like nothing directly that they did other than just go out into the wilderness. They really didn't do anything wrong. And I think even the father, although he's a park ranger, it didn't really seem like even he did anything wrong. Maybe what you could argue is the most wrong is that our main character has some guilt because on that night, Leroy like tried to wake him up because they heard and like they saw the silhouette of the creature outside the tent or something, and Leroy like woke him up, and I think our main character woke up for a bit. The monster started to attack them, and then our main character just kind of played dead or hid under his blanket, and then he wakes up. I don't know if it's hours later or what. I don't know if he was knocked out like during the altercation or whatever. But he essentially just wakes up to Leroy's missing. The dad is freaking out. He calls fellow park rangers and stuff. And it turns out that his friend Leroy is never found. It becomes a big, issue sounds too small. It becomes like a big media circus, and even his dad ends up being on not a trial for hurting Leroy, because some people did like suspect him. There were whispers and stuff, but the Leroy's parents ended up suing the dad, and so it ruined our main character's dad's life. It ruined our main character's life. He hasn't been able to have any close friends since. He's moved away from Mountainburg like a few months after his friend went missing because he just couldn't. His dad couldn't take it, and he couldn't take it, so he had to go live with his grandparents. And then he grew up, right? We get this time jump that I think is really interesting, where we get the origin story first, and then we get this time jump where now he's like, I'm gonna return to Mountainburg. I have the time. I'm going to see if I can find this monster. Like, I know Leroy's not alive anymore, but I want to get justice for Leroy, and I'm one of the only people who truly knows what happened and can maybe find this paranormal entity, or not, if it was just actually some sort of like a child predator or something. We're never given for sure that it is the supernatural entity. It just, as from a children's point of view, when it happens, it seems like a monster that's like getting them, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So part 2 is starts with, he's basically like, and I can do the end of part 1 just to briefly say, like, my therapist tells me I need closure. I'm uncertain if any can be found. However, I called in all my vacation time and made my plans. I packed my bags in my truck and prepared to do whatever it took to see them through. I decided, despite the illogical nature of it all, I was going back to Mountainburg and to Devil's Den, which Devil's Den is like the name of the forest, the mountain that they were on. Yeah, he still has nightmares. I wake up in that tent again with Leroy shaking me awake. He doesn't shush me, though, and it's not so dark that I can't see him. He looks at me with sad eyes and begs me to find him. He asks me over and over again, but I can't find my voice to respond. So yeah, our main character is kind of crippled by like his inaction, even though he was just a child at the time. He's a man. He's now grown up, a man, but he's living with regret, right? And there's this mystery ultimately at the core of his life, his first friendship that has defined everything else for him in the future. And I think maybe he did get some sort of job as like a outdoor park ranger like his dad, but he did it obviously in a much different area. So now he's going back because he wants to solve this mystery. So that's basically where we're at. Let's get into it. Part 2, baby. Returning to Mountainburg was a surreal experience. As much had changed, I found so much of As much had changed, I found so much of it is still the same. It was an unhappy nostalgia that washed over me as I drove the same roads I used to with my family. Memory took me back to my grandparents' neighborhood without any need for direction. It was heartbreaking when I pulled up to the unkept property and found their once beautiful house fallen into disrepair. From behind the wheel of my truck, I stared out at the house and the old Dodge W300 I recognized to be my father's. Like the house, it was similarly in disrepair, marred by rust and faded paint. It was a somber reminder of what my father had gone through. My childhood home was sold long ago to pay for the lawsuit, but apparently the truck was saved from the same fate. My grandparents had passed away some years back. Yeah, and so not only was his life ruined by this, we have to remember his father's life was ruined. Like, some people even thought that he hurt Leroy, so he lost or had to quit his job. I don't remember. Like, it is a tragedy from both sides, for Leroy's family and for our main character's family. And you also don't even blame Leroy's parents for like, because they're like, he just disappeared off the face of the earth. We have to blame somebody who was the adult that was with him. It was this park ranger guy who you would think would know how to keep people safe camping, and it's just because it was so paranormal, the nature of the disappearance. It's like the dad can't even explain fully what happened because it doesn't make sense in a logical kind of way, right? My grandparents had passed away some years back. I knew from return addresses on mail that my father had never left their home after he lost his own. I knew he would be here, yet a wave of apprehension washed over me, smothering warm memories with the haunting shadow of our estrangement. I hesitated with the realization that beyond what my grandparents had shared, I understood barely anything of the life he had lived after the trial. I only knew that he had lost his job with the Rangers and had only been able to get by doing odd jobs. I was jarred from my musings when the front door swung open. A disheveled man with messy gray hair and beard stepped out in worn out jeans and a stained high visibility shirt. He aggressively waved me off, shouting, "There ain't nothing here for you." I was taken aback for a moment, genuinely thinking he was trying to run off his only son. However, I realized that he couldn't possibly recognize me. We hadn't seen each other in years, but it was impossible to mistake him. I turned my truck off and stepped out as he angrily hobbled over towards me. He was about halfway down the driveway when he stopped, his eyes going wide with a mix of confusion and familiarity. I felt a knot in my stomach as I realized he didn't truly see me, but the phantom of who I had been. I could see he was studying my face as I rounded the front end of my Tacoma. His jaw moved behind his bushy beard as if he was trying to form words but couldn't. "Dad," I said, "it's just me." He shook his head slowly, voice croaking out, "Why?" The single word brought out a lifetime of hurt in me that I had to fight back. My father had been my entire world up until the day everything was taken from us. For my entire childhood, he had never hesitated to spend a single second with me if he could. To hear him question my presence now was like a knife in my heart. I frowned, relaying back, "Because I needed to." We stood there for a long time, just looking at one another. The longer I looked, the more I struggled to recognize the man in front of me. I knew he was my father. It would be impossible not to. He just didn't look like the strong, well-built man who raised me. He looked weathered and frail, having lost so much weight that his clothes hung off his body like a reminder of the bigger man he once was. Time had been cruel to him, aging his features well beyond his years. He almost would have looked how I remember my grandfather, but for the lack of weight. His hands were dirty and covered in little cuts and scabs, shaking at his side. He raised one of them and gestured for me to follow him as he turned back towards the house. He walked with a limp, slowly enough that I had to measure my own steps to stay behind him. He struggled with the doorknob as he led me inside. It was hard to watch, but harder still to acknowledge the state in which he lived. The house was almost as bad on the inside. The floors were covered with dust where boot prints didn't expose the water-damaged wood beneath. The ceiling was marred by similar stains that explained the musty smell that clung to the air. The rusty window unit was rattling as it struggled to warm the living room. The old furniture my grandparents had left behind was worn out and discolored. Discarded mail and newspapers covered the coffee table. Perhaps most disturbing thing was a pistol on top of the scattered yellow papers. The sight of my father's old 5906, the sidearm he had carried as a ranger, sent a wave of nostalgia crashing over me. It was the first handgun I ever fired. a reminder of the man he used to be. It was meticulously well kept, freshly cleaned and polished. Considering the condition of its surroundings, it gave me some pause regarding his mental state. "You've gotten scared of them?" he asked flatly, making me realize I was scaring. "No," I answered quickly. "I've got my own on me." I looked up at him and found him staring back, continuing my response. "I'm just remembering." He kept staring for a moment before he wordlessly turned and continued into the kitchen. I watched him head for the dated refrigerator to pull out 2 bottles of beer. He called back to me, "You want something to drink?" "No, thank you," I lied to him. "I don't drink." Interesting. So our character does drink, right? Yeah, he does drink. Either way, yeah. He does drink, but he lies to his dad, maybe because he just doesn't, yeah, he wants to keep his faculties. He doesn't want to just get lost down a whatever, an alcoholic or a whatever hole with his dad, a grief hole where, I wanted my faculties about me. This wasn't really a social visit, and I expected he knew that. As much as I had longed to reconnect with my father, we both knew it wasn't going to happen. It had been 20 years, and the most interaction we had was infrequent and often late greeting cards in the mail. I needed whatever information he could give me, anything at all that could help me start this journey with some sort of sure footing. My father was the only other person that might have an ounce of evidence to work with. Whether details he remembered, however small, might give me a chance to uncover the truth. He came into the living room and situated himself in my grandfather's recliner. He set one of the bottles on the wobbly table beside him before opening the other, taking a drink. He stared straight forward at the wall for a while before he spoke again. "What did you come back here for?" he asked, with all the grace of a drunkard. His apathy was palpable, and it rankled me intensely. I felt my body get a little rigid as I forced out my answer. "Leroy." He immediately shot back, his demeanor changing drastically into borderline rage. "He's dead, son." "He's been dead," he insisted, sitting up in his seat and wildly gesticulating in my direction. "And there ain't no finding him. Only thing up here is trouble, and you've been gone from that for years. You need to move on." His voice was growing hoarse from shouting. "You need to forget him, me, and this place. You've grown into a man, and you have a life away from here. Go live it." Having expended all his energy, he slumped back into his chair and brought his beer to his lips. He drank deep, finishing the bottle as if it was the only thing that could satisfy his thirst. His chest heaved as he sucked breath through his flaring nostrils. He returned his gaze back to the wall and tried to stifle a coughing fit. It was far from the response I had wanted. In fact, it was the only time in my life I had ever seen my father angry. All I could think of was the gentle, kind man he had been and how those memories suffocated under the weight of this angry figure before me. The man who raised me was lost. All that remained was this broken, bitter husk. I shook my head, pushing through his vitriol. There's something, some kind of sign or, well, something that can bring closure?" He choked out angrily. "There ain't none." That boy died under my watch, and the only closure I ever got was my suffering in a courtroom, and that didn't do the Watsons no good. I struggled to find something to say back to him. Looking at this tired old man, everything seemed so pointless to argue. It was suddenly apparent that he hadn't ever moved on. He was still in that clearing in Devil's Den, lost in that moment. My shoulders slumped as I let out a sigh. I often wondered why he never left Mountainburg after all that had happened. I couldn't understand why. I couldn't understand what would keep him in a place where everyone thought he was a murderer. My grandparents had told me about the way he had been unwelcome at church and around town. Until that moment, I couldn't fathom why he didn't just leave. Because he's punishing himself, because he obviously blames himself, and so he thinks, he's like, this is my penance. I need to be a pariah. You know, I deserve it. Not because he hurt Leroy, but because he didn't protect Leroy, right? You know, because he blames himself, even though I think what needs to happen at this part, in order for our character, our narrator, to maybe get somewhere with his dad and move forward. I'm not saying this is what needs to happen for the story to move forward. I'm saying, like, if I was the narrator, this is what I would do. Is I think you need to tell your dad what you know about that night, and that Leroy woke you up, and that you two both heard something and saw whatever silhouette or whatever getting into your tent, because that is something that ultimately your dad never knew or never heard. And I think that if our narrator, if he shows this dad that he's sharing this burden, whether he's been living with his dad or not, that it's been weighing on him his whole life too. I think that if the dad sees that, it will kind of help the dad to realize that, like, oh, I need to do this not just for myself, for my son, because my son maybe isn't a pariah, but my son can't move on either, and he doesn't deserve that. You know, he has this whole life to go live, like he says, but he can't do it because he feels responsible too. And so I think that's where this needs to, I think that's what would maybe help them get to a place of, like, okay, I'll tell you what I know, or I'll sort of a thing. Now who knows? Like, maybe the son will find out some other way, or maybe there's a lot that could happen, right? There's a lot of ways to crack an egg, so to speak. I hadn't ever considered that he was trying to find something here as well. Maybe he genuinely believed there was no trace of Leroy out there. He must have believed there was redemption to be found, maybe absolution through his own self-ascribed punishment was obtainable. He was my best friend, Dad. I forced the words out, refusing to let him drown in sorrow without casting a lifeline. I haven't been able to move past that day any more than you. I need to go back out there, even if it's pointless. I have to do something. I can't sleep at night. I can't live with myself if I don't try. My father muttered something under his breath, but I couldn't make it out. I stood for a moment, hoping he would say something, anything that might be helpful. When it became obvious that he was done, I turned my back to him and made for the door. Opening it and stepping half through the threshold, I paused. I considered something for a moment and then half turned back to face him. With exasperate. Oh, sweet. Yes, he is going to tell him. I was worried. I was like, because this story is so many parts, it's like 20 parts or something like that. I was like, I'm worried that he's not going to tell him yet, and that's going to come later. But I like that he's telling him right at the end, like as he's leaving, With exasperation in my words, I told him, I heard something outside the tent that night. My father didn't react. But I continued, Leroy did too. He woke me up scared, and that's the last thing I remember. I never told anyone because I was scared, but I know we weren't alone that night. His eyes were on the wall, but his gaze was distant and hollow. He didn't move, he didn't speak. He just sat there, limply holding the empty bottle, even as I closed the door behind me and left. I returned to my truck and sat in it for a while without turning the engine over. I hadn't come with high expectations for his assistance, but I was at a loss with what I got. The man inside the house was a ghost of who raised me. The heartache of it all left me feeling only more broken than when I had set out on this journey. There was nothing left for me in town except the road to Devil's Den, so I started my truck and put it into gear. I turned off onto I-49 and began the lonesome drive to my destination. For miles, okay, I thought he meant 4 miles for a second, but it is 4 miles. For miles, I numbly drove with memories playing in my mind and little more than the white noise of a distant country music station for company. It wasn't until I found myself at an intersection staring at the sign for the state park that I came fully back to my senses. I found new resolve in that moment, telling myself that I would not leave Devil's Den without the closure I had come for. I wouldn't be a slave to grief. I wouldn't allow myself to sink into despair. Man, what a great, I don't think I can upvote it, but what a great, like, I almost like part 2, not because the writer did what it's what I said I would do in the situation, which was tell the dad that you heard something that night and that you have the guilt too. It's not just because he necessarily did that, which I do think was smart of our character to do. Like I said, it's what I would think might help in that situation. But I really liked this part because part 1 had like the spookiness and set the tone for like the childhood kind of whimsy that got turned into very real world, or not even whimsy, but the childhood like idealism that got turned into very real world like trauma and just, life turning upside down. But it explained all that, the first part, from our narrator's point of view, and then and he explained how he grew apart from his dad in that part, but with this new part we get to kind of see that it is as bad as he made it out to be, as his dad made it out to be. It is, they both are equally stuck from this in their own way. Like, sure, our characters maybe not like a full-blown whatever pariah alcoholic living in the same town doing odd jobs, but it shows them that although they were a healthy, loving, good father and son, and then this one horrible thing happened, and then it kind of split them apart, but they never really like got on a different path, or they never really separated too much from that one moment in which they were both kind of separated from each other. Because eventually, the Leroy's going missing led to him moving in with his grandparents, which led to him moving out of the state and all that stuff. And it's like, it just does a really good job of illustrating that, like, this mystery is the only hope that this even relationship between father and son has. right? Like without any sort of closure in that, it's like they can't even whatever find their way back to each other, because the dad can't forgive himself. He probably can't trust himself with his son. He probably feels like he failed as like a protector and all that stuff. And so the dad just has all these layers and layers of guilt. And then I think in the same way, our narrator feels like he failed his dad as a son, and his dad had to like take all the blame or take all the heat, but he feels like yes, he doesn't like respect his dad now, and his dad seems like a shell of who he was, but he doesn't feel like he even deserves to have a father, or he deserves to have a relationship with him. Because it's not like it's not like he gets mad and is like, well, I never, after seeing my dad wallow in his own self-pity, I decided I never wanted to see him again and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't say like that. It says it like, I decided that I realized that we were never going to be able to like reconcile or move past this, It's very much he very much paints it as a two-sided coin, and that's because of the guilt that he also carries. And yeah, I just like it. I think it's well written. I think with part 1 setting everything up so nicely and having the big time jump and everything, I think this part 2 is really about like it gets us to Devil's Den, it gets us to back to Mountainburg and all that stuff, and it just kind of shows us in like stark but very realistic detail like how a tragedy like this can affect somebody. And that's not even to say like how his parents are. Like who knows, maybe at some point in this story our narrator is going to need to talk to Leroy's parents or something, and that's a whole other can of worms and things. But it just, yeah, I like it. I think it was good drama. I think it was a good like dramatic conversation scene. Even the part where he looks at the gun, where it's like, and the gun is clean when everything else in the house is dirty. And I almost saw that as like a glimmer of hope for the dad. But then at the same time, I don't know, that our narrator just says, just remembering, like, and so it's like, it's this trophy or whatever, so to speak. It's this medal of who his father once was. He was this tough, well-oiled park ranger who was sharp and clean and whatever, and everything else is decayed around him, but the gun is still taken care of. And it's like, maybe the dad just holding on to it and keeping the gun clean because he's got to use it to like protect himself because people want to kill him around town. We don't know exactly why he's keeping it there, but I just liked all those little details, and the details about how he grabs 2 beers out of the fridge and then he asks, do you want one? So it's like he was already going to have 2 beers regardless, just little things like that. I thought were understated and subtle, but I think they just painted a really good picture of the father and son, right? Because that first part paints a pretty idyllic picture of a father and son, and so now in part 2 we get the decayed, just like the house, and that, and their relationship is like that. And even the fact that the dad just like is about to run him off, and then and then he realizes that, oh shit, it's my son, and all that. Like, yeah, I just liked it. It was just, again, part 1 I liked, part 2 I liked, a lot. I think part 2 was great. So part 3. And what I also liked about it is too is it seems like with some of these parts, I mean, we know that this was written as like a novella or a novel. I got that information from the author, and they just posted it on CREEPCAST out of like to share it with the community. But I think the pacing, like I think part 1 makes sense for chapter 1, and part 2 makes sense for chapter 2. I think sometimes in these stories, you can tell that people, like, part 3 isn't written yet; they're just on part 2, right? Whereas this does seem like a full narrative was completely written, and then it was kind of whatever broken into these little digestible pieces that I think is nice to have it. Yeah, it just seems well paced, I guess is kind of what I'm getting to with that. Driving into Devil's Den, I was pleasantly surprised by the low traffic. The brisk weather of late October seemed to have driven off all but the most ardent of nature lovers. On the road in, I hadn't passed a single car and didn't see one until I was pulling into the parking area at the visitor center. There were only a couple of people outside, idly chatting over a map. Neither bothered to even look up toward me as I got out of my truck and headed for the building. I held the door open as an older couple were heading out, politely greeting them before slipping in behind them. Inside, the building was almost as I remembered it. It was difficult to decide if that was depressing or not. The interior was entirely dated to the 90s. The wood veneer gave away the lack of updating, though the dull beige walls didn't help. Past the kitschy shelves of souvenirs, there was little more than a checkout desk. Behind it was a pair of older women gossiping over some unseen object in front of them. One glanced up and offered a welcome to me as I approached. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Checking into a site, hon?" I nodded in response. "Yes, ma'am. Should be under Emerson." She immediately began typing on her keyboard, peering down her nose through the bifocals at the outdated monitor. It took her long enough that I awkwardly managed eye contact with the other woman, who kindly smiled back at me. I could only give her a simple nod in acknowledgement before finding the most interesting patch of wall to stare at. Okay, the woman said, mercifully breaking the silence. "Looks like I have you for, 15 nights. Is that right?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, justifying by adding, "I plan to hike the whole park while I'm here." The other woman chimed in with concern in her voice. "You know it gets cold up here, right?" "Yes, ma'am," I answered. I came prepared. The two of them exchanged a look, but they otherwise said nothing to challenge me. The woman working the computer finished checking me in. She handed me my paperwork with a thank you for my patience and visit. I thanked them for the help and made for the door. I returned to my truck and took it down the road to my campsite, turning off. Parking it, I took a moment to appreciate my surroundings. There was no one else around, just me and my truck amidst the beauty of the Ozarks. It was a shame that this place had been so thoroughly ruined for me. As I took it all in, the one thing that kept coming to mind was that somewhere out there was the thing that took my friend. I slipped out of the truck and was halfway through unpacking my gear from the back when a woman spoke up from behind me. "I didn't know we had a forestry guy coming in." I looked over my shoulder to see her. She was around my age, dressed in a ranger uniform. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her blue eyes smiled as much as her lips. She She was pretty in a hometown sort of way. She might have been one of the girls I went to school with. Oh, I'm not here for work, I said easily, setting my bag down by my feet and turning to face her. Just up here to enjoy the scenery. She stopped a few feet away and placed her hands on her hips. You camping overnight? I nodded. Yeah, I got one of the sites registered. Figure I'll get some hiking in before I set up. She looked down at my bag and raised an eyebrow. You like rucking heavy bags? I gave her my best disarming smile and answered with the most confidence I could muster. Oh, you don't have to worry about me. I know the rules. No camping outside designated areas. It's just good exercise. She seemed unconvinced for a moment, but eventually laughed a little and offered me her hand. You know we have to ask. I'm Jen. I took her hand and shook it. Henry, it's nice to meet you. My heart thumped in my chest as I did my best to mask the anxiety churning within the pit of my stomach. I set out with the intent to break enough rules in this park that it could cost me my job. I hadn't expected to be stopped at all. I knew Forest Service decals on my truck would get questions, but it was easy enough to tell the half-truth that I was on vacation. The actual act of deception was far more nerve-wracking than I anticipated and utterly outside of my skill set. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, he's used to being honest. He's used to being an honest park ranger, so it makes sense. He's like, I didn't expect to have to be lying this soon, and like, you know, and it's nerve-wracking for somebody that's like not used to it or used to being in a position of authority to now be on like the other side where he's planning on breaking the rules. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. It was far more nerve-wracking than I anticipated and utterly outside of my skill set. The guilt gnawed at me as I considered the weight of my words and their consequences. I covered my bases by getting an actual campsite, but now I was second-guessing my plans. I hadn't actually intended to use the site, but now I met a ranger and told them I would be. My mind raced as I considered the possibilities. I couldn't help but imagine patrolling rangers checking in at night and finding my site empty, my truck, while my truck remained nearby. They would suspect I was lost in the park in best case, but Jen would certainly know better at this point. You know, and I was waiting for it. I was like, she's gonna recognize you, dude. Like, you already said she looks like someone you went to school with. You even kind of recognized her, so. And everyone's gonna know the story and at least know your dad around town, so they're probably gonna see the family resemblance, you know. She interrupted my deluge of thoughts. You sort of look familiar. The panic crashed over me like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me in the abyss of my own dread. There was no more grave fear I had experienced in my preparations for this trip than the potential of being recognized. I knew there was some risk that one of my father's old colleagues might realize who I was. The possibility that one of the children I grew up with could be working or visiting the park and spot me was such an infinitesimally small one that I had dismissed it. I felt like a fool in forgetting how few people ever left the regions they grew up in out here. Ben chuckled and waved it off, though. But I'm guessing you're not from Kentucky based on that accent. Relief flooded through me as I smiled back at her. No, never been, actually. She nodded. Maybe you just have one of those faces. Funny how that works. I've met a few down here that remind me of folks back home. Yeah, I trailed off, considering my words for a moment. I knew I needed to be careful giving up too many details, but at the same time, I realized this was the most I'd spoken to a pretty girl in years. He's like, this is my shot. I can't waste it. It was a stupid reason to risk my entire plan. I justified it in my head that it was reasonable for a normal guy to flirt with a girl like this. It would be strange if I didn't keep the conversation going. It might even be more suspicious if I tried to get out of it. However, I knew the truth that I was just a man that couldn't overcome his baser instincts. I don't know. It's sort of strange, I finally said. Didn't you just tell her you're not from here? Yeah, you just said you're not from Kentucky. Never been, actually. And then, I don't know. It's sort of strange, I finally said. I'm actually from around here, and it's been a while since I've been back. A lot's changed, and I don't recognize a lot of it. Jen seemed to perk up at the admission and immediately asked, Really? What part? Down by Van Buren, I half lied. Ah, she smiled a bit wider. Is that what brings you up this way? I nodded, but lowered my gaze to the ground. Well, I guess I just have a lot of memories up here. I kind of needed to come back. I could see her shift her feet a bit at the sort of curious way a kid would, leaning into the conversation. I get what you mean. Every time I go home, she continued wistfully, I'm surprised how much changes, and I'm always trying to chase those memories from when I was little. A silence crept in between us. The wind rustled through the trees, and I felt awkward for the first time in the conversation. As unnatural as it had been, I managed through it because I had a purpose to what I was saying. Now that someone else was actually trying to connect with me, I remembered why I hadn't had any conversations with pretty girls in a while. Anyways, Jen broke the quiet tension. I won't keep you. I looked up at her and found her smiling at me. I smiled in turn and simply said, Thanks. You have a great day now. You have a great day now. You do the same, she said, her words almost playful. And don't feel shy if you see me again. It was nice talking to you. With that, she gave a simple wave before turning and walking away. I'd be a liar if I said I didn't watch her for a moment, appreciating the view. Oh, you horny bastard, you. You're supposed to be looking for Leroy. And now you're finding a wife? No, I'm kidding. It's nice because like this story, we know it's long enough that this character is probably going to come back into it at some point. And if there is a love interest, like, honestly, it's just good for Hollywood storytelling. You know, creepypasta internet horror, I don't care as much, but it does make sense. And to have somebody who is currently a park ranger in this park will be helpful for the story and the plot. So I'm digging it, and I like that it's like he kind of told her, you know, enough without telling her too much, or he kind of made it seem, you know, he made it seem like he had a deeper kind of purpose there without being like, I actually came here to find a long dead boy, you know, anything crazy like that. So I like that interaction. Again, I think it's subtle. I think it works well. But I do have to say that I am a little bit confused about the Kentucky line, because they're in Kentucky, right? But I'm guessing you're not from Kentucky based on the accent. And he says, relief flooded through me as I smiled back at her. No, never been, actually. Yeah, I'm just a little confused on like why she isn't like, so you lied to me, or you know, and maybe that'll come up later, but I just, that is the one thing that's the one kind of thing that I'm like, I don't know if this is a plot hole or like an issue maybe it'll come up later. Maybe it'll be like, she's like, you said you'd never been here, and then you said you grew up here. Which is it? You know, maybe it'll come back like that, in which case, fine. But it almost confused me just a bit, because I'm like, there's the town he grew up in, which maybe is in Tennessee, and maybe the park is in Kentucky, and so maybe there's like that aspect to it. She was saying, you're not from Kentucky, and he's like, no, I've actually never been, you know, but I grew up near here, and because the states are like small enough and close enough together, it makes sense. And maybe I'm just missing that aspect because I'm not from that region. But yeah, I don't know. That's just the only like thing I have a kind of a question mark by in my mind, and maybe that could be cleaned up, like with if the dialogue had another little piece in it. But ultimately, it's a small thing, and I don't think it's something that's like really going to hurt the story. I think more, if anything, it's like it could just be something that she didn't catch in the moment, that later she'll have a reason to go back and ask him about it, and it'll be kind of a reason for her to re-enter the story later on. It could be that too, so I don't know. But again, like I say, I really like this, and I like all his little like begrudging flirtation, or begrudging like mentions that, like, even though I was out here for a reason or whatever, I couldn't help, you know, she was a pretty girl, I wanted to talk to her. It's been so long since I really talked to anyone, and it's almost like his life was completely on pause the whole time he was away, but now that he's come back, it's like, and he's actually facing these demons, it's like he's allowing himself to like even consider living again, or he's allowing himself to, you know, because it said before how he never had friends after that. He could never, you know, relationships never came to fruition for him. That's not how the story phrased it, but it did a good job of being like, I lost this one friend, and so I haven't had any like other relationships since, because this one was just so scarring, you know, to him, so traumatic, losing his best friend, that he hasn't really had any, you know, relationships. He hasn't really had any friendships since then. Not that him and Leroy were just friends, but yeah. And so, but I also kind of wonder, I'm like, so is our like 25-year-old park ranger like a virgin? You know, I don't know. Maybe he could be kind of naive in some ways too. So maybe like the fact that a pretty girl is actually talking to him, you know, he did get kind of flustered and stuff easily. So I don't know. There's never having any relationships, and then there's being a straight up recluse, right? And I don't know. I mean, clearly he has kind of a reclusive park ranger job. You know, he works for the Forest Service too. So maybe he just doesn't have that many opportunities, but I don't know how fully naive he is. And, you know, maybe that's because of part one in some ways. Like, it did cover a lot of space in that early part, but the story's called Devil's Den. You know, to me it made sense that it didn't be like, so I went off to college, I had a few girlfriends, but nothing serious, I could never get Leroy out of my head. Like, it could have added a little flourish of something to let us know that, like, okay, well, he's not like socially inept, or he's not like a recluse, right? But he is just somebody who has trauma and doesn't make bonds easily, you know. But yeah, so anyways, those are just kind of my thoughts about that whole conversation, and kind of where it leaves me on his character. And the fact that I have these questions and that I'm thinking about this much just shows that it is a good character, and I care about this character. I care about you know, him, and I think his name is Henry. Did he say right? He says his name's Henry, which I need to remember. If it wasn't in part one, I definitely need to remember it. I think maybe it was, but I just forgot, so I just kept calling him the narrator. It's Emerson's his last name, I think, which probably his grandparents' name. He says his name. I know he does. Henry, nice to meet you. So yeah, Henry Emerson, we can assume is his name. God damn it. I need to quit messing around with this scratch paper. Jen. And then his dad, which I don't think we have his dad's name, but it's really funny because, like, literally everyone but Leroy in this story that's been a character, literally everyone's been a park ranger at some point, or worked for the Forest Service in some way. I don't know if Henry's actually a ranger or not. His dad was a ranger, so it makes sense that he did become one too, especially if he wants to find Leroy at some point. He's gonna need that skill set, right? Like I'd like the little lines like this. I'd be a liar if I said I didn't watch her for a moment, appreciating the view. In a different time and place, I might have tried my luck. However, I knew I had something more important to do than ruin another chance at romance. I made it this far and couldn't allow myself to be waylaid any further. I turned back to my truck's bed and continued to pull out the last of my supplies. I buckled my webbed belt on, donned my external framed backpack, and grabbed my trekking poles. To anyone looking, I must have looked crazy, decked out like I was about to hike one of the most challenging trails in America. Maybe to the experience, they just think I was overprepared. The reality was that I'd loaded up everything I needed for cross country hiking, mountain climbing, and spelunking. I had my P299 concealed at my P299 concealed that appendix, and my Model 629 packed into my bag. Overprepared wasn't a strong enough word. I had everything I needed to track, fight, and kill a grizzly bear because I expect the howler. That's what it's called, right? Howler. Okay. I expect the howler to be no less dangerous. Whatever was out there, I was ready for it, even if things went south. I had a GPS unit that could get me off of the moon. Fuck yeah. See, and what I like about this too, I know, sorry, I should just read to the end, but I want to say what I like about this too is it's not the whole like, oh, I have to find out what happened to him, and it's like, so we need to go into the dark. We need to run out into the forest in the middle of winter with just a jacket, and we need to find him. It's like no, he's had years to think about this, and it's showing in terms of his level of preparation. You know, he's bringing rope, he's bringing, you know, all the stuff he needs to mountain climb, to go into caves, to search just basically everywhere he can for a body, for you know, for some sign of either the howler or of Henry, you know, or of Leroy, sorry. And so yeah, I think I just like that because he's got a good reason to like put himself in this danger and in the crosshairs of this supernatural thing, if that's what it is. But then also he's got he's got like the the skills and the preparations to maybe do what nobody else had done, because everyone else may have been too focused on, well, did his dad do it? Or, was this a hate crime? Was it, there were probably so much stuff that was being said at the time that it's like, and the best, they say like the best thing is showing up, or whatever that saying is. And it's like, if you want something done right, do it yourself, sort of a thing. And it's like, if he's really going to make a go of this and try to find his friend or the thing that killed his friend, he wants every advantage, right? And so I just like that, because it's different from the regular horror trope where you're going off half cocked and, whatever. I like it, The moon, a flare gun, a satellite phone, and enough gear to live off of the wilderness near indefinitely. Nothing more than I needed, nothing I wasn't accustomed to using or carrying in my line of work. I closed the tailgate and locked my truck. From this point forward, I was prepared to go the distance. I started toward the trailhead with my eyes firmly set on the path ahead. It wound away into the forest, blazing autumn foliage shading it from the sun. Deep within the trees, there was darkness, and within it, I knew I would find what I was looking for. Hell yeah, brother. Again, great part 3. Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop for tonight, but oh shit. I just want to say again, like, each part is moving the plot forward well. It's paced very well. It's the subtleties, like in the conversation and like the parts with the dad, and now with this new forest ranger Jen, and even him checking into his campsite and like trying to kind of keep a low profile. It all just works well for me, and I like this sort of one-man quest to, he's a man on a mission. He's going to solve this mystery. If it means just running across the whole mountain for fucking 10 days and searching every inch of it, that's what he's going to do. And I like that, right? And I'm curious to see if the whole story takes part. I mean, because it is called Devil's Den, so it may just take part all within the forest, the camp, the Devil's Den Park. Or I think what would be interesting too, if it does, but then later, like, he finds something, or he finds some information, and then like he has to go research something in the town, or he has to go back to his father and ask more questions, sort of a thing. I think there is a lot of cool things that can be done with this. Like, it could go a lot of different ways. It could be a straight up survival wilderness, like, mystery / horror, or it could be like, investigative. Maybe Jen can kind of help him. Maybe they find out some information. They find out that, like, there might have been a child predator in the area, and they need to like research that and see where they may have camped, or where they may have been on the mountain. Like, there could be so many ways that this could go, and I'm very excited. It seems very well written, very like grounded. Even though the first part you could kind of say like is fantastical with a monster attacking them, even that was so well grounded and well done, because he does just he gets kind of scared once Leroy wakes him up, and then his fear, he just kind of blacks out. And I think that is probably true to form, and it's true that he said he just hid his face and tried to like pretend he wasn't there, which is a very real thing for like a kid to do. And I think that again, I think that's why he's guilty, but then also I think that it did a good job of not like showing its hand. Like, sure, he believes it was the Howler, and sure, he heard something that didn't sound human and all this other stuff, but we still don't know anything for sure. You know, we haven't seen a monster yet fully. And so, yeah, it's just, it's, I think maybe he said he heard the tent unzipping too. So it's like, did the howler know did the howler know how to use the zipper, or is there something more nefarious at play? And is this going to turn out to be non-super paranormal, supernatural? I don't know, but very fun. I'm definitely in. I'm definitely, we'll see how, like, as we get into some of the, I don't know, at least the first, because there's 25 parts, so you have to figure part 12 or so, we're about 12, 13, we're about halfway through. So it'll be interesting to see how much happens within, like, the first, even let's just say 10 parts. It could happen sooner, it could happen later, but, like, in the first 10 parts, I think, it'll be more clear, is this strictly a survival on the mountain story, or is this, gonna go, is it gonna go supernatural and paranormal, and is he gonna be tracking, like, is he gonna be finding and hearing stories, and maybe other people go missing on the mountains, and he's tracking this thing? Or is it going to be more of a cat and mouse, where he's not sure, he keeps looking, and he finds little things here and there, but nothing conclusive, nothing, definitive. I'm just excited because this story's done a good job of getting us onto the mountain quickly enough, and, like, making this mission so clear that it's just gonna be fun to see how it unravels. I think it's a great sort of pacing and stuff. Like I said, so far, I'm definitely into it. But yeah, that's gonna do it. Howler of the Hills, everybody. Devil's Den, part 3, that was by Howler of the Hills. But what a fun story. I think, like, it's such a simple kind of concept, but it just shows that, with, like, enough care and attention to detail and putting it where you need to in your writing, it's like any story is worth telling and vastly interesting, even if you feel like, oh, I've read this type of story before, or, oh, it's a cryptid in the woods. Like, those are a dime a dozen type stories on, like, No Sleep and on Reddit and stuff, or on the CREEPCAST, sphere of stories. But it shows that, like, yeah, with enough kind of character development and details and the right sort of pacing, even a 25 part story can really hook you early on, and can just make you want to read it all. Cause that's basically where I'm at now. I'm like, I'm wondering, what part do I have to skip to have to know definitively what happened to Leroy? You know what I mean? Is it the finale? Is it the last part? Or could I do it, could I skip to part 13 and just read that? I don't know. But I'm not gonna do that. We'll stick with the reading order here. But very fun, very, very fun. Shout out to Howler of the Hills, and shout out to Kaiju Fan. Sorry, I know here, we could probably pull it up. Actually, the easiest way to do. Oh, don't go to the finale. Just want to go to their profile. Is that library? There we go. That close it? No, that won't. That'll close it. But yeah, shout out to Kaiju Fan too. I meant to follow them earlier, so I definitely want to. Horror writer and Sopranos enthusiast. Hell yeah. You and me both, brother or sister. Yeah, but we're gonna check out Kaiju Fan, check out Howler of the Hills. Like I said, it's it's a full length like novel that they've just posted on here for free for people to read, and or maybe it's a novella technically, I don't know. But it's just so awesome, you know. It's great. I'm really enjoying it. So shout out to them and um to both of our authors, and you know, everybody just, you know, keep reading stories, keep commenting on stories, keep uh being in your writing groups and talking to your friends and supporting each other and reading each other's shit, and you know, helping each other write, I think is so important. And it's I think why the, these communities, whether it's Tales from the Creep, whether it's Anxiety Pilled, whether it's the Mezzo podcast, it's why I think these communities are so ultimately important. And you know, No Sleep's great because it's just so popular, but No Sleep is not nearly it's mainly just how can we ban your story, and even if you get your story up on there, it's not an accepting, like, supportive place where it's really going to help you work on your craft. And so to have these other communities that are that way is just really cool, and you know, I'm stoked to see it. So thank you to everyone. Thank you, Harold, for being in the chat and you know, yeah, being my one chatter for the evening. I appreciate you. I hope everyone had a good 4th of July weekend. Yeah, and I think that's it. Oh yeah, go watch North American Pantheon. Because yeah, it's great. Or listen to it, I guess, not watch. I say watch because to me it is like as good as a TV show, but you know, go check it out. You know, if you just put into this search bar uh North American Pantheon or horror series, it should come right up. Although YouTube's been weird lately, but Numa, this one should pop up. Subscribe. Go check it out because it's a worthwhile series and it's just getting started. So if you want to be a part, you want to be a fan of something of the next big thing, I would say check out the North American Pantheon, because to me it definitely has that potential to be the next one of the next great audio horror stories, at least, you know, whether you take that to mean like a Baraska or a uh um what was that other one that uh fucking Lonely Broadcast Station, you know, something like that. I think it has potential. And what is so cool about this audio series is that, like, the writer is so directly involved in it. Not that other writers haven't been in the past, but it's like, you know, they're actively working on it and creating it, and I think even doing the narration for a lot of it, or for the one of the main character in it at least, and that's so cool. That's so sweet that it's RC Bowman is their name, that they're producing that for free just for people to listen to, you know. Because I mean, the series is popular. I don't know if they've had offers to like do other things, but I just think it's really cool that we're getting it for free on YouTube, and yeah, that that we can just listen to it. You don't have to read it. You can just listen. I think that's awesome. I love audio series and audio books. So shout out to Dopamine, RC Bowman, Kaiju Fan 22, Howler of the Hills, uh, Mezzo Scale Podcast, um, Harold Sleeper in the chat. Shout out to you. And yeah, just thank you, everybody. That'll do it for me for this Red Death Mask stream. I will see you guys next time for more Devil's Den, but also more new horror stories coming at you fast. Peace.